John Strawberry Hill.
Okay, well,
Anyway, so who's here, Michelle? Is everybody in except for
All right,
Steve?
I can do a, yeah, except Steve, I think everyone that's supposed to be here is here. I can do a quick roll call if you'd like.
Well, let me get it started. We'll get started then. The planning commission meeting of Wednesday, July 14th will come to order. Michelle, roll call, please.
All right, Ms. Demiglio,
Here.
Ms. Shockley,
Here.
Mr. Mushak, Mr. Ferguson,
Here.
Mr. Baxtendale,
Here.
Ms. Tennyson,
Here.
Ms. Langallis.
here,
Now, do you see Mike? Is Mike on?
Yes, he waved.
Okay,
Yes, I'm here, Fran. Hi.
because I can only see one person at a time.
With a summer
So-
haircut he's on,
I'm sorry?
with a summer haircut.
Oh, okay, very good. Very good.
I
Okay.
fell next to the lawnmower, actually. So. Catch up.
Apologies for the delay. I didn't have the invitation. So I don't know, I guess, I don't know, I mislaid, waited.
No, Fran, I didn't get it either, so you and I are in the same boat.
Well, Tamara didn't get it either. So Michelle, for just future, I know, Brett, the day of the meeting, please send whoever it is, you need to send us the invitation again, because by the time, if we got it before, by the time we get here today or whatever day, so please make a note to send the invitation the day of the meeting and make it
Sure.
easier for everybody, okay? Thank you. Okay, so we have, first on the list is we have a public hearing on subdivision 3655. It's, is it 127? Because there's a typo, it says 1Z7, I think it's, not sure, LLC in Boughton Development LLC, 174, 176, and 176 and a half Boughton Street, 5-lot subdivision. Okay, I see Attorney Suchi. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for this evening. First, I extend my condolences to Commissioner Shockley. You have quite a road ahead of you to get that mess cleaned up, but we're thinking of you and hope that it resolves itself quickly and you're not displaced or inconvenienced too long. And to Commissioners Ferguson, Baxendale, and Langallis, congratulations on your reappointment. And we're pleased that you're back before members of the Planning Commission, and for all the good work that you've done. We thank you for that and look forward to your next tenure. Introduction. As you know, my name is Liz Suchi. I'm a partner with the law firm of Carmody, Torrance, Sendek, and Hennessy, 707 Summer Street in Stamford. I represent the applicants and owners of the property. Present this evening is Mr. Jolly. He is a member of and principal of A1Z7 LLC. That's one of the owners, and Boughton Development. And also present this evening is Steve Santacroce. He's a professional engineer with the firm of Rose Tiso, which prepared the civil engineering plans and stormwater management plan. Matter of housekeeping, neighbors were notified of the submission of the application back in May, and a certificate of mailing was provided to the zoning staff. It should be in the official file, which provided notice to all abutting and property owners and those across the street of the submission of the application. And then neighbors were also notified via certified mail return receipt requested of tonight's public hearing. That notice was mailed on June 28th in accordance with your requirements, and an envelope containing the green cards and any mail that was returned to us as undeliverable was delivered to Planning and Zoning this morning and also should be in the file. If possible, could Mr. Santacroce screen share the survey of the property? And while he's taking care of that, as I mentioned before, the applicants are A1Z7 LLC and Boughton Development LLC. The properties are 174, 176, and 176 and a half Boughton Street. The properties are zoned B as in boy residence. They are District 5, Block 81, lots 169, 171, and 173. The total acreage of these 3 lots is approximately 3/4 of an acre or 32,670 square feet. The map that's in front of you is the existing conditions survey. And as you will note, there are a whole bunch of smaller lines and lots. Those were lots created many, many years ago. Lots were consolidated. So right now the application before you consists of the 3 lots that I mentioned. In the middle lot, there is an existing dwelling, patio, and driveway. So these 3 lots total 3/4 of an acre, and we propose to redevelop and re-subdivide these lots into 5 single-family B residence zone lots, all of which comply with the B residence zone regulations. Each of the lots will be at least 6,250 square feet. Each lot has at least 50 feet of frontage and can accommodate a 50-foot diameter circle behind the setback. Sidewalks and curbs will be installed along the frontage of these 5 lots, so there are no waivers requested. Street trees will be installed in accordance with the subdivision regulations, and the plans have been modified to make them compliant with the quantity and location of street trees. And as I mentioned before, each lot fully complies with all the B residence zone requirements, so no variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals were necessary. If all approvals are granted, including your approval of this re-subdivision, the lots would subsequently be developed with single-family dwellings on each lot. Steve, if you wouldn't mind showing the screen sharing the proposed subdivision. As far as SEAC sign-offs, the South Norwalk Electric and Water sign-off has been submitted. The fire department sign-off has been submitted. We received comments from Public Works and responded to those comments. And as far as Water Pollution Control Authority is concerned, back on April 6th, we submitted a request to extend the sewer, and that request was under review by the Water Pollution Control Authority. Unfortunately for us, we got caught up in the middle of new policies and procedures that the Water Pollution Control Authority was considering, was revising, and only last week did the WPCA enact new policies and procedures for sewer extensions. What that means is that we will be required probably next month to go to a public hearing to extend the sewer. And that sewer extension, of course, that application and that hearing would require notice of neighbors as well, which we fully will do. I see no reason why the WPCA will not approve the sewer line extension, but unfortunately we are now subject to the new policies and procedures, which were not in place up until the enactment of the new regulations just last week. Here's the subdivision map in front of you. You'll see lots 1 through 5. They are all in excess of 6,250 square feet. They all have 50 feet of frontage, and the street trees that are shown meet the requirements of the subdivision regulations. Sidewalk to be installed also meets the requirements of the subdivision regulations. Since there is an increase proposed and an alteration of impervious surface from what exists today, a stormwater management system has been designed to attenuate stormwater for up to a 25-year storm event, as is required by DPW requirements. But the site has also been analyzed for all storm events, including a 100-year storm. At this point, I would like to have Mr. Santa Croce describe in more detail the stormwater management program and the design of these 5 lots. If you have any questions of me, Mr. Santa Croce, or my client, we're certainly happy to answer them at any time. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. You all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so as Liz mentioned, my name is Steve Santa Croce. I'm a professional here in the state of Connecticut. I work for CSO and
Except for now, excuse me. You're fading in and out. So whatever you were saying, you were in
Okay.
and out, okay?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
We can.
It's okay? Okay. Yep, like I was saying, my name is Steve Santa Croce. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I work for CSO. I'm just going to summarize and quickly go through the site design plan for the proposed subdivision. Here's our site plan. As Liz mentioned, all 5 lots meet the subdivision regulations. And so these houses are kind of an example of what could go there. Each lot will be designed at a later date. As this is a subdivision proposal at this time. And as you can see, the lot slopes from the high point where their property line, and stormwater runoff travels over land, over mostly wooded surface areas, There's an existing house here, but the balance of the site is currently impervious surfaces. So we're going to be did design stormwater systems that will attenuate for up to the 100-year storm event. Just going to zoom in here. So we have subsurface water storage areas connected to trench drains. And with these systems, they will reduce the stormwater runoff from the existing condition, even with the added impervious area. And, so basically, you're going to have less runoff going into the stormwater system that's existing at Booton Street than is currently going into it. So now I'm going to go to the sediment and erosion control plan. We have some silt fences, typical anti-tracking pads, just your basic sediment erosion control requirements are met by this plan. Landscaping, as Liz mentioned, we have street trees proposed, which meet the subdivision requirements for the spacing of those trees. Also for the type of trees, they're all native proposed species. We have some typical details. We're gonna have to have a retaining wall. So I go back. This dark line is proposed retaining wall around the site just to make up some grade steep site. So we have details of the retaining wall, typical details, stormwater gallery, utility trench. And here's our proposed sanitary extension. This is a manhole that's existing in front of 172 Booton. So we're going to extend the sewer main out in front of our property, which is that dark dashed dot line right here, so that the property is into that. So I'll give it back to Liz. That's just our design of the site, and
Thank you,
Liz, I
Steve.
don't know if you want to spin. Oh, yep.
Thank you, Steve. If any members of the commission so far have any questions for me or of Steve, we'd be happy to answer them.
Hey, Liz, well, you said before you have to have a public hearing about the sewer extension. So who's gonna have that public hearing? Is that with,
That public hearing will be before the Water Pollution Control Authority. And it's my understanding that the WPCA at its meeting next week will schedule the date for the hearing, which could very well be in August. And if it's not August, it would be September. But that's part of the new process, that every sewer extension needs to not only be reviewed by DPW and WPCA, but there is a public hearing process.
okay, and maybe I missed it, but have all your signatures come in of the departments, or are you still waiting on things?
That's the glitch that we found ourselves in, that we submitted all of the required documents to WPCA and DPW, but since they were in the midst of creating new policies and procedures for sewer extensions, those two agencies have not issued final sign-offs. And for example, WPCA can't until they hold a public hearing. But the South Electric and Water and the Fire Department, those signatures have been received. And there have been discussions between Brian and the staff at WPCA and DPW with respect to this application and the unusual circumstance we found ourselves in the midst of those agencies coming up with new policies and procedures. But as I said before, I don't see any issue with WPCA holding a hearing and not granting an approval of a sewer line extension. makes perfect sense. But if for some reason there's a problem, we clearly would need to return to this board with some other alternative if that does not take place, and we're fully ready to do that. But I don't envision that being an eventuality.
Thank you. I want to stress, we've had issues on larger subdivisions, on what do you call them, the erosion control measures and stuff, and I think you're aware of which one and which was on our agenda every month. So I want to stress, because the owners there, whatever, the attention to be paid to those kind of things, okay? We don't want to get into a situation where we'll have to put you guys on an agenda every month to check because things are so bad with the neighbors and whatever. So I'm just calling that out to all the requirements, the fences, whatever, hey, whatever it is that it takes to please pay attention to that, okay?
Madam Chairman, just for the record, I will share with my client, Mr. Jolly, the background to what you're talking about, and to advise him that those types of protective measures are essential and are very important. And I have no reason to think that Mr. Jolly nor Rose Tiso will not abide by the requirements, but I will certainly let them know what the background and the history is of the property you're talking about and the concerns raised by neighbors.
Thank you. Any commissioners have anything before we open up to a public hearing? Any questions or comments or whatever?
And the only comment I'd make, the pictures we saw of the current situation, the pictures of how it's going to end up from, I believe, the previous presentation, look as though it'll be a boon for Booton Street, frankly. But as you say, it's in a highly contoured area, so the retaining walls or whatever, dams, etc., are very key. But you have made that point.
Did you, Brian, did you ask a question? I didn't fully understand your question, or who
I
are you addressing?
I wasn't, I was just making a comment, I'm afraid. I'm sorry if everybody heard me. Sorry, but did everybody hear me? Yes,
I
okay.
can't. Okay. Any commentary? Steve, Santa Croce?
Yeah, I could go back to the, let me share the plans again. So your concern is the retaining wall along the back of the property and the side here?
Well, yes, that is key, and not only as is being built, of course, with the excess
Right.
water or anything which repaired, but obviously as a permanent, ongoing situation. But as your engineers presumably assured us, it's built to the right standard.
Correct. Yeah, so
So I didn't have a question. I just made a comment to reinforce, one, the attractiveness of this overall site and what you're trying to do, and highlight that it's quite a challenge in the short term as you go forward with this retaining wall and all that will happen in the meantime with runaway water, waste, and the like. That's all. My apologies for causing it.
oh no, yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we designed the site to have silt sacks, with hay bale backing, silt sacks in the catch basins, and all the standard required sediment erosion control requirements that are typically laid out from
I'm glad that water is being obviously considered, because if you remember your last presentation, the public hearing, the neighbor across the street was having significant water problems. And that was investigated, I believe, by DPW and other people. Steve, I saw you nodding your head.
Right.
Mr. Baxendale,
Yeah,
last time, excuse me, hold on just a minute, Steve. The last time we presented an application for Boughton Street, it was further north. And there was a neighbor across the way, and that was a separate application at public hearing several months ago. And there was a neighbor across the street from that property who expressed some issues with respect to drainage. We have not had any neighbors in this area express any issues, and this is the first night of public hearing. I think that was the 2529 Bounton Street application where a neighbor did indicate that she was having issues. And I believe that either you had asked Mr. Kleppen to communicate with her, but that's not this application.
Thank you, Attorney Sushi. I think you're right.
No problem.
Okay, unless there's anything else, we're gonna move on to the public hearing. Michelle, do you have people who want to speak?
So there's one person that we have on, but I believe they're from the hour, so I'm not entirely sure if they're looking to speak on this application. But if you would like to raise your hand and speak, please raise your hand and we will bring you over.
Tell people how to raise their hand. on there.
It's at the bottom. There's a raise your hand feature, and if you click it just once, it should raise your hand.
I don't believe there's anybody here, Fran, to speak.
Okay, all right, so we'll close the public hearing. There's no public that wants to speak. Before we go to a resolution, I have a question regarding the resolution here. We have a draft resolution now on item number 6, financial guarantee. Is that a standard, Steve, is there a standard number or you?
I'll defer to Liz.
No, Steve Kleppen, not you, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, typically that it's not standard per project, but usually based on the size of the property and the work involved. So those usually get figured out prior to pulling any of the permits.
So not at this time, we don't have a number, correct?
No, Brian will probably, because the individual lot development plans and house plans will change as, depending on who's going to build the project. So each one's going to be a little different. So it'll be based on what's actually proposed versus the carving up of the lots.
Okay, and then on item number 7, what public improvements are we talking about here? Because if you look at item number 7, it says the installation of the required public improvements prior to the certificate of occupancy. So what improvements are we talking about here?
Those would be, well, the easy ones, the sidewalks, street trees. Obviously, they've got to connect to the sewer, so that's pending approval from WPCA. So those would be the public improvements involved with the project.
Okay, there aren't any other ones that would pop up that we don't know about, right?
From what I don't believe there's any street improvements that were proposed or any requirements outside of the sidewalk, the trees and the sewer extension.
Before I read the resolution here, it's, we're requiring sidewalks, street curbs, and unless I'm wrong, Attorney Sachi, correct me here, and then we have the tree requirement not be waived, that 8 trees are going to be installed. And the effective date of this, it says July 23rd, but I'm assuming you have to have all approvals, whether we go, whether we approve it here or not. It would have to be after all the WPCA and all that for this to come into play, correct? Steve Kleppen.
Yes, yeah. So the approval dates, we have to run the legal notice after, assuming you come to a positive vote, we have to run the legal notice. So that's kind of triggers that. But in order for them to get any permits, then they have to adhere to all the other conditions that are within the resolution, or before they can get their CO, whichever is the particular condition.
Okay, so I'm going to put, I have a draft resolution here. We should have been in your packets, planning commissioners, which has 14 items on there. Attorney Sachi, have you seen this whole list, or are these surprises to you?
Yes, Madam Chairman, we have been made aware of that draft resolution to approve and a draft resolution to deny, and there are no surprises. I believe, though, that the number of street trees was increased from 8 to 10. I thought I counted 10, but whatever the requirement is under the regulations, we will certainly abide by that and install the requisite number of trees as is required.
Okay, so before I put the resolution forth, any other commissioner have any comments?
Can I just ask a question? Do you know who the builder is and what the market value of these homes would be approximately?
At this time, we do not know either. I do not know. My client hasn't made a decision if he will develop or if he will sell the lots as approved. And as far as market value, it'll be whatever the market can bear at the time that we go to market, but we don't have answers to those right now.
Okay, thank you.
Fran, I have
Okay,
a
go
comment.
ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say this is a smart development. I am going to support it because it makes sense. It certainly creates affordable, we're assuming, single-family homes based on their size and the lot size that, relatively speaking. And that is the kind of housing model that we could always use more of in Norwalk. So I'm going to support this.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm putting forth the resolution here to approve as the resolution is stated. Steve Kleppen on the trees, I don't know if it's 8 or 10, but whatever the right number. The resolution says 8 on here. And so we have 14 items on the resolution. And then we have that the sidewalk requirement not be waived, the street curbs requirement not be waived, the street tree requirement not be waived, and effective date on here says July 23rd, but according to what the dates ought to be. Do I have so I'm putting forth the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, so it's approved. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, Madam Chairman, members of the commission for your time. I hope you have a quick night. And if I don't see you next month, a very happy rest of the summer. Thank you for all of your help.
And Liz, that's not Positano. What is that behind you? Because I guessed right the last time, but you're fooling me.
You're not too far off, Mr. Mushak. It's Path of the Gods above Positano and Amalfi. You're not too far.
Looks nice.
I
Looks
was asked
nice.
to find the path to the gods, but thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the summer.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, next we have this is a discussion and action on applications. It's the zoning commission referral, 2021-16R, Workforce Partners LLC, 132 Flex Hill Road, proposed text amendment to eliminate required area for historic preservation eligibility in the D resident zone. Okay. What do we have, Steve Kleppen?
Sorry, I
Attorney,
was muted. Yep, we have Attorney Blank and his team, as well as I believe the applicant online, so they'll walk you through their request, and staff will chime in whenever you have questions or comments.
Okay, go ahead, Attorney Blank.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Yeah, Adam Blank of Wapsie Rosen, live here in Norwalk, attorney for the applicant Workforce Partners, or more specifically 132 Flax Hill LLC, which is owned by Workforce Partners. With me this evening is Kepney Moses of Workforce Partners, as well as our consultant, Todd Bryant. Tonight, we're asking you to act favorably on a referral from the Zoning Commission to eliminate the minimum lot size for historic properties to be eligible for certain zoning waivers within the D resident zone. So currently in the D resident zone, the existing regulations allow owners of historic structures to seek waivers of various zoning requirements in connection with their efforts to preserve those historic structures. But that regulation only applies if the historic structure that you own happens to fall on a lot that's at 12,000 square feet or larger. So that only applies to a handful of properties in the D zone that happen to be on very large oversized lots. Within the D zone, the minimum lot size is just 5,000 square feet. So we came to the Zoning Commission a while ago, and to staff looking to make an incremental reduction from 12,000 square feet to a 9,000 square foot minimum lot size to open up this historic preservation regulation to additional properties. It was recommended to us, which we agreed to do, rather than make that incremental step, to seek the total elimination of the minimum lot size requirement in the D zone. Because in the theory being that, if you have a house worth preserving, what does it matter what size lot it's on? Isn't it something, don't you want to encourage preservation, whether a house is on a small lot or a large lot? And if you want to preserve it, this allows you to, and allows the zoning commission to provide some incentives for preservation. The existing regulation, if I can share my screen. So on the existing regulation, which hopefully is in front of you, you'll see that the zoning commission can allow for waivers of minimum lot area, a whole bunch of criteria, but you've got to have a narrative prepared by a historic architect, submitted. The commission has to refer it to the historical commission for their review and recommendation. This commission can have an outside peer review, architecturally review it. And this is only applicable on a special permit application. So we're asking you guys to vote in favor of a change to this regulation. Assuming that that's granted by the zoning commission, it will allow them on a case-by-case special permit application basis to consider individual requests to apply those waivers to potential developments or improvements to existing properties, which would then still require a historic architect. It would allow for a peer review. It would be required to go to the historic commission. And I'll share once more. Just to give you a little sampling, this is not comprehensive, but in the D zone, these are some of the properties that are not currently eligible for any kind of historic preservation waiver, but would be able to apply with a special permit application if the regulation is changed to allow for these smaller lots to apply. And it's our view that, that some, if not all of those, are sort of worthy of preservation, or certainly worthy of consideration by the commission if an application is filed for waivers. And this has already gone to the historic commission, which voted unanimously in support of it. With that, I think with that, I will sort of end our portion of the presentation. If you have questions for me, if you have questions for Todd, who's the historic sort of expert here, or for Kevney, the developer, we are happy to answer those.
I'll open it up to the commissioners. I do have some questions, but I'll hold till other commissioners chime in. So who wants to go first?
This is Tamara Shockley. Can you just clarify, if this is approved, how does this affect the other homes that are in your similar situation?
So if it's approved and you happen to own a home that's, it's got to be on a historic inventory. If you own a home that's listed on a historic inventory and you want to make some changes to it, whether that could be adding units, it could be expanding the footprint, you want to make changes. And you go to the zoning office and they tell you that you can't because you don't have the right lot width, or you don't have the right setback, or you don't meet the parking requirement. This regulation would allow them to make a special permit application saying, waive this parking requirement for us. And in consideration of you waiving that parking requirement or that lot size or some zoning criteria. Here's what we're willing to do to sort of preserve this historic structure and to improve on it. And so you would anticipate there's a fair amount of discretion for the zoning commission, which is what that's this reg exists currently. It just doesn't apply to the smaller lots. And the way that it works in practice is that the zoning commission will weigh how big of an ask are you making? You know, are you saying you're only allowed 6 units in the zone and you want to make an apartment that's got 12 units? That's a lot. What are you doing? What's so great about the historic preservation that you're offering that would make us want to give you that? And it's a balancing test. There's discretion there, but it's certainly a benefit to all of those property owners who would have a historic property. It gives them a little bit more flexibility. And what it really does is it increases the likelihood that some of those properties that I just showed you will ultimately be preserved rather than allowed to deteriorate and then be demoed and have a new building put up.
So if I have a similar property as what you're asking, and I wanted to do renovations, would I have to go back and ask for a special permit? Or would this now just allow me to do whatever I would want to do, because now this has changed the zoning regulations?
So what you wanted to do before, you could do without a special permit or a variance, you can still do that. But if what you wanted to do before, you were not allowed to do, this gives you the ability to file a special permit and potentially do that if that special permit were approved. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. And how big of a lot does this cover, this special permit?
Well, so the text change would say that there's no lot size requirement. Anyone that owns a historic property in the D zone that would like to have some waiver from some zoning requirement would be eligible to apply for a special permit to do that and have to go through the zoning commission and the historic commission.
Okay.
And what truthfully, what one of the obstacles with a lot of these historic properties is that they were designed as single family homes when zoning didn't even exist. They weren't designed to sort of be in the right place to match up with our existing zoning regulations. So it gets fairly hard to save the structure and comply with the current zoning regs. It's easy to do that if you're building from scratch, but it's hard with the existing buildings.
Right, thank you.
Question, if I may, Fran.
Go ahead.
It may apply to Todd, and it's a very nitpicking question, but why is 31 Concord Street, which was built in 1940, worthy of historic preservation?
So that I have no idea. The full list. There's some of them on there that are head scratchers. Todd may know, but I'm not the one that's making the determination, nor is the client. The Historic Commission or the National Registrar of Historic Places has deemed them worthy. But Todd, if you want to add anything. You're muted.
Or Steve Kleppen.
The criteria for the National Register of Historic Places is 50 years old or older for consideration. That doesn't mean everything 50 years old or older is significant. There is no age criteria technically for the local historic resource inventory. But again, these are all things that if this 1940 house were to, if a developer were to consider something that would be eligible under this regulation, then and it weren't it was not listed in the local historic resource inventory, then the historical commission would have to rule on that, and they would have to determine whether or not they thought it was significant enough to qualify. So you start maybe with that 50 years old or older, and then if there's anything special about it that it's not always age related is all I'm trying to say.
So Todd, it's included in the list that basically Adam had at the bottom of his email. That was one of the houses. Is that on the National Register, or you're recommending it from the Historical Commission?
No, it's the local, it's the historic resource, Norwalk Historic Resource Inventory.
Okay,
Essentially the lowest level of recognition. And the next level up to that would be the state register, and the next would be the national register. The majority of these houses are not eligible for individual listing on either the state or national register, but they are locally significant, which is why they deserve to be listed in the local historic resource inventory.
thanks, Todd.
Sure.
I have a quick question. The developer is called Workforce, correct?
Yeah.
Do they have any other interest in other properties doing something similar on Flax Hill currently?
So they have, and Kevney is on, he can speak to it more, but they do own quite a number of properties, some of which are historic, and they have in fact, under the existing regulations, already obtained approval through zoning for similar improvements to historic properties. They own the two parcels next door to this one.
What addresses, are there any other addresses that they have interest with on Flax Hill besides those two adjacent properties?
Adam, I can chime in.
Sure.
That'd be nice.
And hi, Steve, and good evening, Commission. Thank you for hearing us this evening. So we own 138 Flax Hill, which is immediately adjacent to 132. We also own 35 Clay, immediately adjacent to 138 Flax. And further up the hill, we have 204 Flax Hill, which was actually, we submitted a historic focused application last year for that project, which was approved by Planning and Zoning.
I see. How about, are those the only ones you have interest in currently?
On Flax Hill, yes, sir.
Okay.
There's one additional property, actually. In 2019, we had submitted an application for, actually, I take that back. Flax Hill was first, Elmcrest was second. So it was last year as well. One Elmcrest Terrace, which is immediately adjacent to 3 Elmcrest Terrace, which was the Harbinger project that brought this new regulation about in the city of Norwalk. Again, that one Elmcrest project was also approved by the zoning commission.
Okay, so my audio wasn't working, but the 132 Flax Hill, you're looking to keep the house as is, looking to build additional units on that property, that parcel?
So we can certainly get into that. There's currently 3 units existing. And by right within the D zone, based upon our lot size, we are allowed 5 units. And as part of this application in front of zoning, we are proposing the addition of 2 units from 3, equaling a total of 5.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I just want to chime in if I could, to say that this regulation is similar to one that's been functioning exceptionally well in Stamford for a good 20 years. And that does not have a lot size. I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that has a lot size requirement.
Fran, I have a couple of questions.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, this is Tammy Langalis. I look at the list and do question whether some of the houses on the list are, historic in nature or character. But anyway, I guess you guys didn't put together those photographs. And I am in general interested in preserving historic structures in Norwalk because I think it make our city appealing and gives it a historical perspective. But I'm very concerned that what you're doing here just allows basically to add more units. In most of these, I went by all of the properties that were on the list, and they're all in, D zone is very densely populated. And if we just are cleaning them up just to add more units, I feel that it's not a win-win for the city. What would be a win-win for the city is to preserve these buildings, but not add density. And if you get these approved, do we have the ability, if each property comes before either the planning commission or the zoning commission or the combined, if that's the future, does every one of these properties have to appeal or apply, I should say, because, or is this a blanket thing that you're asking for?
There was a number of different sort of questions or statements on there. So let me try to run through them for you, Tammy. And if I miss anything, let me know and I'll try to hit it. So number one, right? I mean, let's try to, on the big level, let's try to look at this regulation already exists. Okay, so if you don't like it with the smaller lots, why do we like it with the bigger lots? And for the bigger lots, the ones that have come through you now and where it applies now, those are the ones where they're saying, hey, listen, we have this existing structure that houses in it 4 units, but we want to add the carriage house. We want to add the back of this building to add 30 more units. Those make a big difference in a neighborhood, right? I mean, it's a fundamental change, I would say. What we're talking about is for the smaller ones. In the D zone, without this reg, we can put in 5 units. You can do a lot more with a special permit than 5 units in a D zone. So we're not actually asking for any increase in density beyond what's already allowed in the regulations. That's not the issue here. And in this particular case, there's some fine tuning, but all that's really happening is that under the existing regulations, we are required to have 6.5 parking spaces on site. We have on-street parking, but our site can only accommodate 6 spaces, and you round up from 6.5 to 7. So we have a pending special permit application with the zoning commission, asking them to round that down to 6 spaces, so we can have 6 spaces on site. This addition of units for us, the 2 units that are being proposed, there are no exterior changes to the structure. It's not being expanded on. It's just reconfiguring interior space to take very large existing units and make them a little bit smaller for us to add 2 units. So number one, I would suggest that on the smaller lots, the neighborhood impact is going to be much more positive because the number of unit increases that you might see is going to be smaller than it would be on the much larger lots where they can currently take advantage of these waivers. One of your points was that you'd like to see this apply, but not in a way that would allow for more units. I would tell you, frankly, that if it doesn't allow more units, it's not going to be used, right? I mean, a developer is not going to say, hey, listen, let me come in and spend a lot of money fixing up in a historically accurate way the facade of this structure so that my income generated by the property can remain the same. You know, right? I mean, they're just not going to do that. So this is the incentive. I mean, the better incentive that we've talked a little bit about, but is fairly complicated to actually enact, would be to allow the development rights to be transferred so that you don't develop this property or other historic properties. You give those rights to some other property without a historic structure on it, and they build something much greater than what zoning allows. And then the historic structure stays untouched. But those are very complicated, and we don't have that in Norwalk nor in almost anywhere in Connecticut. So this is the next best thing. The carrot, so the developer is we'll let you build a little bit more than you might be able to otherwise get. The return is that you not only preserve the structure, but you make it better. And it has to be to the satisfaction of both the Historic Commission and the Zoning Commission.
Okay, well, thank you. You know, pride of ownership shouldn't always be just because you want to make more money off of your property. And if you drive by some of these, particularly Trinity Place, you can't even turn around in there. So if you add more units, you know, I feel like this is just kind of a density grab. And, you know, we have it in the big new fortress apartment buildings. And I think trying to preserve these, I mean, I get, you know, they want to make more money off of their properties, but I don't, why wouldn't they just want to fix it up anyways? You know, some of these properties like over street, the front yards are pavement. And that really brings down a neighborhood. It makes it look not as appealing as if there's grass or, you know, shrubbery. So that's my concern. And a lot of these buildings have the whole backyard is a parking lot. And so by adding more units, you know, even if you ask for less parking, it doesn't mean that the people coming to live there aren't going to have a car. It just adds to parking on the street, which most of these houses are already on fairly densely populated areas.
Could I briefly chime in, Adam?
Yeah,
Sure. Again, this is Kevin Moses, and Tammy, I really appreciate your comments. And just to provide a little color on that, as I'm sure you know, anytime you touch a property nowadays, you have to bring it up to current zoning regulations. And that's one of the hardest parts about these historic properties is that their legacy and, you know, their parking dimensions, their aisle widths, their setbacks, their green space, their rec area, so many of these things are out of compliancy. And I can tell you from experience on prior projects and with regards to this one, that we actually had to make our best efforts of bringing the property up to current compliance, inclusive of setbacks, buffer areas, recreation space, et cetera. And I think that through this regulation, it's a net positive. And I can speak to what Adam was saying earlier directly, and that, you know, developers don't have a huge incentive. And I appreciate your comment on sense of ownership, you know, but just within the the constraints of, again, the economics of trying to operate properties, you know, developers are in it, obviously, for profit. And you know, it's absolutely a quid pro quo, but the sense of ownership for us personally is through this project. You know, 132 Flax is, you know, somewhat blighted currently. It, you know, does not have any remaining historic character and doesn't have recreation space. It doesn't have safe and modern day vehicular and parking layouts, which we're creating, and we're creating green space and creating rec areas. So I guess my point is that through these projects, it's not just adding density, you're really bringing the properties up to current code, and making them very livable by today's standards. So I think it's an overall net improvement. And I hear exactly where you're coming from, but for our standpoint, we're trying to create great living environments, you know, for our residents. And I believe that this project and this regulation helps facilitate that and incentivize improvements to properties that would not otherwise possibly be improved and kind of left to the wayside.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, thank you.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
do like your property at 138. I believe that's IVE. I'm not sure if it's an I or the letters VE and then the address, correct?
Yes, ma'am. IVE or I've Living is our quote unquote resident facing brand.
Okay.
So yes, that is kind of our management company, our resident brand, so to speak.
Great. Okay. And I do think you have done a nice job on those. And I would say that,
Thank you.
you know, there is incentive if you make an apartment nice, charge more rent. You're welcome. But you could also, you know, people do look for larger apartments if they're already there. And if you make the building nicer and you make the property nicer, you can command a better rent. You don't have to divide it up to get more rent. So anyway, just a point of.
It's a very interesting conversation. And I think, Adam, we could hearken back to Mr. Westmoreland's comments from the Historic Commission, where he noted that he actually appreciated going from larger units to smaller units because many of these legacy 3-bedrooms end up having more people occupying it than should be, more cars on the street, more use, intensification, et cetera. So I think, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, absolutely, but I think there's probably a counter viewpoint on both sides of it.
And we did look at, one of the things we looked at, because they do own the adjacent property and have the ability to acquire some additional property there, at what we could do if the structures were just demoed and the density would be substantially greater than what's proposed. Now, we'd have to fight, I mean, the Historic Commission wouldn't appreciate that, and there would be some fighting over it. But without this regulation, without any waivers, just complying with the existing zoning regulations, you could put a lot more there if you just got rid of these structures. You know,
Yeah, to a certain degree, you guys are fighting some old mistakes that the city of Norwalk made years ago, like the one at the bottom of Fairfield Avenue, 2 Fairfield Avenue. The entire property is covered with tar and a brick structure added onto a wooden structure. And I would say, without trying to insult the property owner, it's a very unbecoming look, and how that ever was allowed by the city of Norwalk, you know, none of us here can imagine, but it happened. And so you guys are maybe fighting some of that too.
Yeah, and our ethos is purely improvement to that neighborhood and that street frontage. And as you had noted, I think 138 Flax and 35 Clay are very good examples of the dedication we have to that end.
Thank you.
Fran?
Any other commissioner?
Fran?
Yep, go ahead.
Hello. I live in this neighborhood, and I've seen improvements on Flax Hill over the last 20 years that I've lived here that have been welcome, in terms of blighted and even abandoned buildings being turned into better quality housing. Maybe that means more expensive, but it overall, in talking to many of our neighbors here, I'm in Golden Hill, I'm a block over from Flax Hill, and I'm 2 blocks from Fairfield Avenue and a block from Taylor Avenue, all D zones. I'm in a C zone on the edge of it, surrounded by D zones, and I've seen the changes. And certainly we're in a historic district. Golden Hill is a state recognized historic district. I support this. The Historic Commission supports this. So I would support this as well. As a planning commissioner, I would defer to the folks who are given the authority to preserve our history. If they support this, and I do. I also think that I see firsthand properties that are non-conforming that are stuck not being improved. And they become basically, I would say, substandard housing. And we should never support substandard housing. We can support affordable housing, but we should never support housing that is dangerous or so historic without improvements that the electrical systems, the HVAC systems, et cetera, are not up to date. And that is very common in our neighborhood. And I want to just share a quick personal story. I bought a 1910 house across the street from me on Elmwood Avenue that was abandoned. A tree had fallen on it. It hadn't been lived in years. It was full of animals. I bought it and from a family that had owned it since 1955 and basically walked away from it. And I restored it. And I had to follow the zoning rules for that historic house, which almost made it unaffordable because I made it a 2-family. I increased it from a 1-family to a 2-family, but I had to put 4 parking spaces on it on a house that only had 1 parking spot. I had to basically regrade the entire property to fit the 4 spots for who I knew. And I know the tenants, we knew who was going to move into this house. It's I'm a landlord, but they're friends. They each have 1 car. So suddenly I had to spend, $40,000 putting in 4 parking spots for tenants who only needed 1 car each. So I only needed 2 spots. And it almost made me decide not to improve the house. It would have gone to a developer who would have knocked it down and put up a multifamily house on that lot, which would not be as attractive and have obviously more units. So I can personally say that I understand how this could work to preserve housing, improve substandard housing, and not necessarily increase rents And overall, I'll say, I just want to add that from a state perspective, the conversation over the last year, as we're all aware, is about how do we increase housing in an area with a housing shortage, which makes housing unaffordable. So we should not be looking at the addition of units or density as a bad thing. And I live in this neighborhood that's very dense, and we don't have gridlock. We don't have any of those problems that people associate with density. You know, rush hour in the morning, not everybody gets up and goes to work at the same time. So we don't have all those problems. So adding units to a historic neighborhood and all our D zones are near transit and in downtown areas is a plus for the city and a plus for our community. So I'm going to support this.
One short.
Go ahead.
This is Tamara. This is a house that has a historical designation. When you go in and make it 5 units, do you gut it or do you just put up walls? And does it lose, by making that change, does it lose its historical designation?
That's a really good question, Mrs. Shockley. Again, Kevin Moses from Workforce Partners chiming in here. So the historic elements that remain are primarily located in what I guess you could call the common space or foyer area once you enter the building. The porch of the structure is not historically accurate at all. And that's one of the major focuses of our improvement efforts as part of the application. But the interior elements that are historic will remain. So many of these historic properties have been chopped up over the years into multifamily, where they were at one point single fams. And just by experience and owning a few of these, I can tell you that, you know, the quote unquote foyer and entry areas remain fairly intact. And much of the exterior or the trim within the hallways, you know, whether that's the coining and trim above the door casings, et cetera, all that stuff kind of remains. Walls have been thrown up, obviously, to demise the spaces. But any historic elements that are there today would remain. What we're doing is chopping up, say, a 3-bedroom, right, that's already been augmented over time into 2 units instead of 3 per se. So again, the common spaces that maintain those historic elements will be maintained as part of this project. And let me tell you, like the newel post and staircase and paneling in the foyer is amazing, and Todd can attest to that. And all that stuff is going to stay, and the exterior is only going to be improved.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Commissioners? Okay, hearing none, then I have a few questions. Right now you have 3 units in there. How many bedrooms are there? Units?
There are, Adam, do you know that offhand? I think there's a 3-bedroom. Is it a 2 and a 1? I'll give me one moment.
I looked it up online. It said 7 bedrooms on the tax record.
So there's 3
That'd be-
apartments. There's 3
3, 3, 1.
apartments and
Or
It's
322.
322.
Yeah, 322 is right.
all right, so you're gonna break up all those 3 units, make them, so what are you making in there? 5 units of how many bedrooms?
Just give me one moment.
Is it too late, Madam Chair, to ask for a sketch, or is this too early in the preliminary viewing? Should we
Well-
normally have a sketch at this point or no?
You know, we really, we really wanted to focus on the amendment to the text itself this evening.
Well, you guys ought to know what you're making in there. You have two big trash things over there, right? So you're doing stuff already. Yeah, those two, what do you call them? I can't think of the word. Dumpsters, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So there's two big dumpsters over there full of stuff. So you must have an idea of these two additional, well, the whole thing is being changed. What's it gonna be, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be two one bedrooms on the first floor,
2 ones on the
two on
second.
the second, and 1-2 on the third.
Right, so the third floor remains unchanged as a 2-bedroom.
All right, so this is a three floors apartment. I mean, 3 floors house.
Yes,
I'm gonna jump around. I have a bunch of things. One, a clarification on the house next door, 138, right? It's listed here as in the package that was given to us. In one area, it's 8 rental units. Then on the other one, it was 5 to 8, but it's got 9 electric meters over there. So are there 9 apartments over there?
the 9th meter you're speaking of is actually the owner meter, so that picks up like hallways, common areas, etc. And we're actually working with Steve Kleppen right now. There were 8 units on the property, which was non-compliant. He asked us to decommission a unit, which we've done. So there are now 7 units on the property.
Okay, so I went by, I've been on that road. I've been to Ben Franklin for many, many games, basketball and stuff. There is never any parking anywhere. So I took a ride there last night, 7 o'clock, because I wanted to see it myself. And there wasn't a parking to be had anywhere. I just wanted to park a minute, take a look. So I had to do 2 drive-bys because I couldn't find a parking anywhere. So when you talk about on-street parking, there isn't any. Okay, there's no street parking to be had. So whatever you're adding, where would these people park? You talk about the rec space, and I gotta say, I got a bunch of stuff I'm gonna jump around. In one of your, not sure it's in this package, but in one of your packages, because this has been on, I don't know if it's the 4th time or whatever, about adding a picnic table. You're reducing the yard, but you're adding people. So adding a picnic table. One of the comments that was made, it says this house has right now tonight has no historic content. So as I look at the changes that you want to make here, which is the front porch, the post, the handrails, the new windows, and the removal of fire escape, I would propose to you, and also about, you talked about bringing things up to code, and well, that's your job to bring things up to code. And these things here that you're referencing to, I would suggest to you that these are normal things that you have to do. I'm gonna say you're putting in I think you're putting in an ADA in the front, in the entrance over there. As I said, one of the readings that we've had, and the porch and all that, it's probably not in good condition that you have to replace. The new windows, from what I could see from the drive-bys, I'm sure it's time to change the windows and all that. So there isn't any, what does the city get? Okay, and you're saying, well, I can raise this and build something bigger, as Adam talked about and stuff. Well, that's your prerogative, right? And then you got to come back to the process, planning and zoning process, to get approved on things. You talked about, well, the common areas, the common spaces. How big are they? When you got the foyer and the entry, you talk about the trim. Okay, these are small things, and with 5 apartments in there, how much of, these are small things. You're gutting the inside, and it's your right to do, but within regulations. Just gonna finish up here on my list. Removal of the fire escape. Don't you have to put in a fire escape? I mean, that's an unsightly one, but you're
Well-
gonna have to do something, right? So these are a bunch of questions that I have, and I may have more after your answers. I don't know.
Well, and listen, we'll endeavor to answer those questions tonight. But I think I have to sort of point out that the special permit is not in front of your commission tonight. The only thing that's in front of you is the text amendment. And really all of the concerns that you've raised relate solely to the special permit, which the zoning commission and historic commission are tasked with considering. The text amendment, whether we want to allow historic properties to be able to make a special permit application, has nothing to do with this property specifically. I mean, certainly that we're Workforce Partners is the owner. They've raised it because they own this property, but the specifics to this property are not before this commission tonight on the referral. It's simply on the text amendment. And the existing rules are that you don't have to bring properties, quote, up to code unless you make substantial improvements to them. So there wouldn't ordinarily be any requirement that we get rid of the fire escape and put in fire suppression. And now the whole place will be sprinklered, which is much safer and expensive. The ADA compliance and the Historic Commission and Zoning Commission absolutely have to grapple with whether they think that there's historic value to this specific property and whether they think that the improvements that we're making of a historical nature warrant the issuance of any waiver. They're not obligated to provide a waiver at all. But I think the main issue for tonight is really, should we only allow large properties that can add lots of units to be preserved with waivers? Or do we want to allow some of the properties that have a historic character but happen to be on smaller lots to be able to apply for, not get, but apply for waivers of certain zoning requirements?
I'll do deference to you and Mike Mushak. I have issues with this. So right now, I'm not looking to support it. And what the planning commission's role is, it goes to, we send a recommendation to zoning. Right, so, and Steve Kleppen, and I don't know how the board's is going on. In case this gets denied tonight, does the zoning have to have a supermajority?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay,
Brandon, may I ask a clarifying question?
go ahead, Mary.
So I'm going to ask this of Steve Kleppen. So am I understanding that should a historic building be torn down, you could feasibly build even greater density? Did I understand that correctly? Is that possible on these lots? That this is simply an incentive with the current property being able to build more density with the limitations of maintaining the property? I'm not sure that I was clear about the difference of preserving the lot and density and tearing down the building and density. Could you address that?
Sure, and I don't know if I can specifically answer it to this address without, looking at the survey again and just doing the math on the allowed density versus what's there. But it's always theoretically possible on any property that allows multifamily. If there's a building there, they may not have the density because the historic building may be located in a manner where it makes adding the parking difficult, that, it may not comply with setbacks. It could be a very large building with, the way the rooms are set up, it's difficult to add units. So for any development, it's always easier to knock down and start from scratch because you're not dealing with old wiring, old plumbing, old structure. It's much easier to build that way. So yeah, it is theoretically possible. I mean, I think the applicant could probably address the density question for this specific parcel more directly.
May I add something to that?
Go ahead.
I guess I'm answering Adam's, well, no, I would be answering Mary's question. Because we have to realize that a new structure can have parking underneath of it. And so you can literally build a much bigger building if you had parking underneath. And in our neighborhood, where most of these properties are located, we've seen a lot of historic properties get demolished, and much larger multi-unit buildings go in. Taylor Avenue, Fairfield Avenue, and Flax Hill all have examples of this. And we've lost some major historic buildings as a result. So I would just answer Fran's comment in that the Historic Commission supports this, and there's no loss for the city. People are not going to choose to live in a building that might have limited parking if they needed it. You know, there are people who will choose to live in a location based on where it is. And as I said, and I live on Elmwood and Hillside. Hillside Street has multiple buildings that have no parking at all on site, none. They don't have a driveway. They were built when we had streetcars, and streetcars came down Taylor Avenue and Flax Hill, and there's no parking, and the grade is very steep. And you see this all over town. You see this on East Avenue, just north of North Avenue, near Stu Leonard's. There's a whole row of houses that are historic that are up on the hill on the right when you're heading north. They have no parking, no driveways or anything. And what we're finding in our neighborhood is that a lot of these historic houses are being basically let go. And, they will have, because the owners can't afford to bring them up to code. So we're seeing a general decline in housing stock. And so I support this because it just makes sense. It makes economic, historic preservation sense. And it's just smart. We already have this in place for larger properties. Why would we make that distinction? If we support it for larger properties, we should support it for smaller properties. And again, it's not like approving this means and people can do anything they want. It's going to be a special permit. It's going to go through zoning commission, historic commission approval. Does this follow the POCD is the question before us when we make a referral? Yes, it does. I would say it follows multiple things in our POCD in terms of maintaining neighborhood character, maintaining historic preservation, encouraging new housing, new affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. So to be opposed to this, it makes no rational sense in my mind as a planning commission. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right, well, Mike, I appreciate your opinion. We all have them. I do. And there's reasons why we have our own opinions. Personally, I don't like the idea. The space is 0.23 acres. There's already 3 units there. Why need more? The parking there is tough on the street. Ben Franklin is a spot that I frequent a lot. I can't find parking out there. To add 2 more units there, they should be happy with what they have right there. I think that's enough for that space. But that's just my opinion, like it's your opinion. But I think it's already condensed already in that lot. Adding 2 more units, I mean, what if everybody did the same thing? If you look at the map, look at the next door neighbors, see how their houses are built out. It's gonna be an extra build out of space. I think they should be happy with what they have, and it's okay for what it is already. They already took out 1 unit already. There was 8 units there. They took out 1 in one of the properties, right? Am I right or wrong?
No, that's not.
The other property
is not before you though. I mean, we're talking.
No. Yep, I understand that, Mr. Blank, but there was another property that they already took out 1 tenant already.
It's next door. It's next door,
yeah,
Stephen.
I do know that. Yeah, so if they're already pushing the envelope on that, I think they're, I just don't agree with what they were doing for that particular parcel. I think it's just too much.
So the only clarification I'm looking for is, with this regulation, are we actually changing what's permissible with density? That's the only thing I'm not clear about, because it sounds like you could still get the density if someone chose not to keep the historical property. So that's the clarification I'm looking for.
Sure.
Because
And
if
so
the primary concern is about density, then I just want to make sure that we're focusing on the issue of, are we avoiding density if we are to oppose this? Or are we choosing what kind of density? That's the question I have.
So to answer your question, At 132, so there's this particular property, 132 Flax Hill, but then there's the regulation itself. If you change the reg, which is what's in front of you, if you vote to recommend change of the reg to allow these waivers, right? For 132 Flax, we could put in 5 to 6. We didn't do the math for developing that parcel as an independent unit, because it probably wouldn't make sense to do that. But if you knocked it down and rebuilt there, it would be 5 to 6 units under the existing regulations without any waivers, assuming we could fit everything in, which again, we haven't had an architect do, but under the existing regs, we probably could do 5 to 6 units. If we merged the lot with 138 and with another lot or two that we can acquire, we could substantially increase the density of those lots as a whole by demolishing what's existing and rebuilding from scratch. That's without any reg change, if we just use the existing regs. If this, ultimately, if you preserved all of the structures there along the street, we think you'd have less density than you would if you demoed them and rebuilt and merged some of the lots to make larger lots. You'd get more density that way. Again, this reg doesn't, on its face, increase density. I mean, I think realistically what ends up happening is you support preservation, and you will then in some cases, because the only way that anyone is going to use these regulations is to add more units, right? Because otherwise, if there's just a cost to it, but there's no benefit, you're not going to see anyone use these regulations. So they will probably result in some additional units coming on historic homes in exchange for those homes being preserved. But you shouldn't really be comparing that to keeping what is in existence. You're comparing it to, well, what would happen if we don't do anything? And it is fairly speculative, but I think it would be fair to assume that some of these lots would be merged, they deteriorate, and you'd have new construction that might put more units in, or might be about the same.
So Adam, you talked about, which is the key here, is looking for waivers. So this being approved, then the zoning commission, and you went through at the beginning and you've alluded it throughout here, they can go in and look for more waivers. So whoever the day is, your own, the owner here, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, because I only can see one person at a time. It's got
Kevin.
no historic content, right? And
No, that's not right.
that's what he
Not
said.
right.
That's what
No,
he said.
no.
Yes,
The
I
owner
wrote
of
it down. I wrote it down.
for
So I wrote that comment down, okay? So these changes that you're looking to make, would you not think these are generic in nature? What are we, except for the foyer, he said, common space, right? Common space with what? The staircase, whatever, the foyer and entry and the trim in the hallway.
Well, we did, Madam Chair, we did initially, and then Todd will have you chime in. We did initially, when this application was in its sort of early stages, we went to the Historic Commission and we said, here's what we're looking to do. What do you think? And they had mixed reviews. Some of them liked it. Some of them thought what we were proposing wasn't enough. And they had specific recommendations that they believed would preserve the historic character and enhance it for this particular property. We took what they had to say into consideration, and we then went back to them a couple of weeks ago where they unanimously voted in support of this in support of the special permit application based upon the changes to the property. And I would sort of submit, with all due respect, that the Historic Commission is the body vested in the city to look after the history and the historic properties within Norwalk. And they're the ones that have given us guidance and feedback. We've had our historic architect work with them, and they're satisfied with it. We don't know the zoning commission. They certainly are going to weigh in on it, but that isn't really within the purview of the planning commission.
Well, we haven't seen, nobody submitted here.
Brian, I'm sorry, Todd has had his hand up, Fran. I'm sorry. I know you can't see everyone. So I just wanted you to realize that Todd has had his hand up for about 5 minutes.
Well, I would expect the staff to tell me that, Mike, okay? So
Well,
staff,
I apologize, Fran. I just am telling you that someone had their hand up for a while.
Fine.
And you didn't acknowledge it.
I can't find the raise your hand thing on the bottom of my screen. So if I could just make a comment, I think Kevin misspoke when he said that. Because, you know, I wrote this house was not originally listed in the historic resource inventory. It requires a form that not only does which I wrote, which does an architectural analysis as well as a history of the building. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you all that. But yeah, the building has been cited, so there's a certain amount of trim that's lost. But its massing and general look and plan and massing has not been changed. The roof line is all the same. The porch has been changed. It's, you know, it's kind of been Home Depotized, if you will. But what Workforce is planning to do is bring it back to much closer to it's just what we believe its historic look would have been. And there are pretty good models up and down the street on Flax Hill. So we have a very good idea of what it would have looked like. Everything that these guys have done has improved the streetscape. And in reality, the interior, the fact that Kevin volunteered some details on the interior, that's, you know, for the most part, your regulatory bodies only, historic regulatory bodies, can only concern themselves with what's visible from a public way. The zoning commission, in terms of density and in terms of what the interior is going to look, that's another story. But this house definitely has enough historic fabric left to be considered historic in both its history and its architecture. And what Workforce proposes to do will in fact improve on what's there now.
And
So
I would
is
just
it-
I
add,
think that was I think he just misspoke.
it was, and I meant to say diminished. And that's my fault.
So is this listed, because on some of our paperwork here, it says to be added to the list. Has it been added to the list?
Yes, by the Historical Commission.
Okay. Mike Mushak, tell me of where the underground that you talked about, underground parking or whatever. I mean, none exist on Flax Hill, Taylor Avenue. So what are you alluding to, please?
That exists on buildings on Taylor Avenue, Flax Hill, and Fairfield.
Are they homes or are they commercial buildings?
No, they're residential buildings that replaced historic buildings that were there, and they were demolished and replaced mostly in the 1970s and 80s in that big sort of condo boom. And we lost a lot of the historic fabric of Norwalk and of the neighborhood in that era, which this regulation and text amendment is designed to alter so that we have a better chance of preserving our historical fabric and not have the replacement of historic buildings with new buildings with parking underneath. And I can't give you specific addresses, but I can tell you that they exist because I walk my dog past them every single day. That's
Okay, Adam, you
Honestly,
said that you,
what kind.
Adam, you said that you could do what you're looking to do right now without any changes to it. So the change is that if this text change goes through, is you want waiver of the parking because there's parking on the street. And I already said my piece on the parking. There isn't a parking space to be had. And you want to reduce the yard space, if you will. So you're adding more people, but you want to lessen the recreational. So why don't you, I mean, why are you in front of us when you can add 2 more apartments to the existing 3 Why come to us? Or why propose this?
Well,
This
because
amendment.
we could not do the development as proposed under the existing regulations. That's not, we couldn't do that. Could we demolish this building and 138 and another one and put up the same number of units? Yes, we could. Could we do this exact development without the reg change? No, we could not. That's why we're asking for this reg change, of course. And what are we, and I'll share my screen here. So if you, what we're specifically asking of zoning, we're not asking any of this of you, but of zoning, what we're asking of them on the special permit is that number one, our lot width existing doesn't meet the minimum lot width size for a D lot. That's pre-existing non-conforming. I would argue that that's not something that would require a variance, that we could expand the number of units at our property without having to change the lot width. However, we have asked for a waiver of the minimum lot width to keep our lot exactly the same. We're not changing the lot size, we're keeping it the same. That's a waiver that we're asking for. And I apologize, this is wrong parcel. The second waiver that we're asking for is for a recreational area. We're not eliminating any recreation. No recreation area is provided at the existing property, but under the current regulations, you have to provide recreation area. So we would be adding recreation area. It's just that the regs require 200 square feet per unit. We're proposing 154 per unit. But we are, and again, for zoning, that's the only thing that's in front of zoning, but we have let them know that as part of our reconfiguration of the drive here and the parking, it ends up throwing additional space for green space on our neighboring property, which our residents here will have access to use. And there will be additional recreation area here that far exceeds what's required under the regulations. That's at 138. We've also, there's a requirement in the D zone that if you're a residential, that there's got to be a 5-foot buffer strip here, here, and here, not in the front setback, but on these three sides. We think it's really close, but we think we probably meet it in the back. But existing right now is asphalt along the property line here and here. We don't have a 5-foot buffer currently. It has to be green. It can't be asphalt. That's the existing reg. That's what's here. We don't have, it's asphalt. Under this change, that asphalt will still be there. We're not adding more. It's just in terms of eliminating the buffer. It's just that we don't meet that buffer currently, and we wouldn't meet it in the future. So we are asking for a waiver of that. The only other waiver that we're asking for is that when you do the parking counts, it comes up to 6.5, which zoning would say that you round up to 7 on-site spots. We're actually going to be providing 6. So we were rounding down from 6.5 to 6 instead of up to 7. So we have 6 spots for the 5 units. That's it. That's all that we're asking for.
I can't get my
Attorney
arms
Blank.
around it. Go ahead.
Attorney
ahead.
Blank, could you please define what recreational space is? I see green grass at the front, and I see on, the one next door that you renovated, you put some bushes. Is that, what is recreational space? Or maybe Steve Kleppen, you can tell us what recreational space
Yeah,
is.
it's a defined term in the zoning regulations. It's defined as an open space of not less than 200 square feet in size, devoted exclusively to recreational activities and recreational equipment and facilities such as play equipment, swimming pools, picnic tables, tennis courts, landscaping, etc. The required recreation area shall have minimum dimensions of not less than 10 feet and shall not include buffer strips or the required front yard. And on this particular property, you'll see there's actually here and in here is green space that doesn't count. And this is all now landscaped. It's going to be landscaped grassed area. None of that counts towards the recreation area because it's in the front setback.
Oh, okay, thank you.
How many people are living there now?
I don't know, Kevin, I don't know if you know, but
You guys own?
I'm sorry, in which building?
132.
That building has been deoccupied.
So you have no tenants right now?
Correct.
No, I'm just looking at the, you know, what'd you say? The green space would be what, 10 feet? I mean, I don't know what, I'm trying to think of 5 apartments and I don't know, take an average of what, 4 people or whatever it is, I don't know.
well, I mean, but I mean, you know, Madam Chair, this location here, if we pull up an aerial, just so that everybody sort of familiar, we're right here on Flax Hill. Clay Street, you know, the staircase that leads down to MLK with the train station is here. You know, you've got 100+ unit developments within easy walking distance of us that have close to no recreation area. You know, it's not like this is gonna deprive these folks of any recreation area. And you do have quite a bit of parks and other areas for recreation.
Fran, just to point out the property next door to the left, if you're looking at the front of 132, the whole driveway is covered with tar. I'd like to know how that happens in the city of Norwalk. It appalls me to no end, but there it is. I wish the zoning commission would go over and tell people to put the grass back. I try to sell properties that have nice driveways with turnarounds, and I get trouble from the zoning department because they say they have too much hardscape. And, you know, by comparison to the house next door, they certainly have a lot more. But anyway, it's just, you know, it's something to point out. It's a little ironic.
Would it be, this is Kevin E. Moses, again, thank you, Commission, but would it be possible for me to share my screen very briefly?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of give you a feel for some of the improvements that we make at our properties. One huge focus is native and adaptive landscaping. That's not only to benefit the environment, but also to the benefit of our residents. And you can see a nicely composed landscape solution here, which surrounds a new resident area that we created. And this resides on 138 Flax, which, as Adam had mentioned, would be shared by 132. So we put a brand new in, you know, comes with a picnic table, a grill for residents to enjoy. And again, all the new landscaping. I just wish I had a before picture of what this property looked like versus what it looks like today. But I just think it is, you know, a great typecast for how we look at improving properties and the track record that we've built.
This is 138 right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what does the back of 132 look like? Do you have that?
Well, you could certainly see it as it is today, just, you know, by driving by. But on the
No, I drove by. You can't see the back. I saw the 2 dumpsters and I couldn't park anywhere to
Yeah,
observe anything.
there's an existing garage which is not historic and will be demolished. A small green space, some existing fencing which we're planning on taking out and improving and putting something in much nicer. And you could see via the landscape plan, if you're interested in seeing that, I'd be happy to bring that up. The landscape plan includes a variety of new native and adaptive landscaping that is also focused on creating a historic character. And we've, as Adam had shown on the quick civil, or I'm sorry, the survey that he brought up, you know, there's new green space that we are creating. We're providing a bike rack, we're providing a picnic table, we're providing a garbage enclosure, we're providing new fencing. Again, kind of the list, if you will, goes on.
Steve Kleppen, is the property that's being developed over at Winfield and Howard Avenue, where it's 4 condo buildings, are they required to put this recreational space as well?
Correct.
What are they doing?
Well, there was 2 applications and one was denied. Michelle, do you recall?
They got their approval for the site plan review that was approved last for, I think, 11 units. But they haven't made an application, so.
Right now, right now, there's a for sale sign on the property.
Well, that's
Right,
another
that's-
brand of the underneath parking too, and dense lot coverage, and what looks to me in the sketches that I saw, 0 recreational space.
Thank
Yes.
you, Tammy.
Welcome. Hard to know.
So I don't know how the rest of the commission, and we can go around to get a feel of where we are. I'm not comfortable with it, and I've been clear about it. The density issue, and all due respect to Mike Mushak and the need or whatever, and what'd you call me? You called me irrational already, so it's just not a rational decision. But I'm just not there. So where are we? And this is just a little straw poll. I'm going to go around. Michelle, just do a quick go around and see where we are.
Mr. Maglio?
Skip me.
Okay.
Go to the next.
Mr. Mushak.
Well, I support this, and I meant no insult, Fran, when I said it was an irrational opposition, but I meant was the Historic Commission approved this unanimously, and as a result of that, there would be no rational reason for us to be opposed to it if the body in the city that is given authority to preserve our history is all for this, why we would go against that. And there's I can see nothing in the POCD that would support a decision to oppose this. Whereas the POCD would have multiple directions or directives that would support this. Including neighborhood preservation, historic preservation, building additional housing, and that is in some cases, but not always. But I live in the neighborhood and I see the results of historic houses being knocked down over the last 40 or 50 years to put up uglier, newer buildings. And this is a way to preserve our neighborhood. I think it would just be sad if we said we were not for this. And based on the Historic Commission supporting it and all of the rationale that's been offered this evening, just makes a lot of sense. It's a win-win for the city. There's no downside. So that's what I meant was irrational, but I didn't mean that as a personal a personal comment towards you.
We're good. Next.
Ms. Langalis?
Could you please let the other commissioners go, since I've been one of the commissioners that's given more feedback than some of the others? Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Peniston?
since I'm not seeing that this by opposing this, that we're really appropriately addressing the density concerns, and because I also believe that preserving the historic nature of the city is an important factor. And because it seems that even with approving the variation of this language, it still has to get approved, I would support the change in the language.
Ms. Shockley?
I'm very supportive of this. I think this is the type of housing that Norwalk needs. I like the idea that you are renovating existing housing as opposed to creating and building 100 and 200 unit multifamily apartment buildings. I think that this is the type of housing, especially if it's going to be affordable housing, and especially if it's going to be in a neighborhood that needs affordable housing. And I think with a house like this, it may inspire the other homeowners to renovate their house. So very supportive of this.
Mr. Baxtendale?
I'm very supportive of this. I think it's exactly in line with the POCD. It's very much in line with the neighborhood there and the preservation of historical buildings and history. Therefore, I'm very much with the Historical Commission on this. If they've approved it, I'm very for it in that sense. So it would have my vote.
And Mr. Ferguson?
I was a little bit confused with the current status of the building. Is it currently historically labeled now? Mr. Bryant said that there was not a form presented. So is it on the list now, or we're trying to put it on the list?
It's on the list.
It has been accepted. The form was presented to the Historical Commission and they did accept it.
Okay, and the other part of my confusion was it's currently empty now. So it was 7 residents in there, but they're all gone. Is that why you're looking to demolish it or just remodel the whole building?
There were 7 beds, but only 3 units.
And we're hoping that we'll get approval from you folks in the zoning commission and not demolish it and renovate it. I mean, that's the hope.
So there's currently no one in there now, Mr. Blank.
Yes.
And the idea is to renovate it and to add 2 more units?
In two more units without expanding the footprint or substantially changing the facade. They're just by cutting up the interior space differently.
And how many units are you talking about? 5 units? How many bedrooms each?
Two, it was, Kevin, do you recall off the top of your head?
There's 4 1-bedrooms and 1 2-bedroom proposed.
And the current backyard will be used by the adjacent property?
There will be shared recreation spaces and open spaces between the 2 properties. That's correct.
But the shared, although we're saying it's shared for zoning purposes, the recreation area on 138 doesn't count as a credit for our recreation area. So we're a little short on our side's recreation area, which is what we're seeking the waiver of. But if you were to combine them, then we have plenty, but you don't get to.
And current parking right now? That's my biggest hang up, Mr. Blank and Mr. Moses, is the parking area. And that corridor, the park is really a tight thing for me to observe when I'm in and out of Ben Franklin. But the current use, how many parking spaces do you have on both those lots, 138, 132?
Adam, do you have the ZLS handy? Because I do believe there's a net gain here.
Yeah, on the ZLS, parking. Oh, here we go. Existing parking is 3.
For 132?
For 132.
And how many 138?
138. I don't actually have that because
it's on the same ZLS, Adam, just in the other column.
He doesn't have. I can share it. I don't think it's on there.
Yeah, if you'd bring that up, I think I can talk through this.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to get my hands around.
Yeah, no, it's all good. All good.
Because parking spaces is a big thing. You have 5 units with 2 parking spaces, like as a landlord, I mean, I know it's not far from the train station and everything else, but
Adam, do you mind? Yeah, absolutely. Adam, do you mind scrolling down to the plans? That's great.
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah, just so we could see both properties side by side.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah. Perfect. So you can actually see the spaces, Mr. Ferguson, that are numbered on 138, not the property in front of you tonight, but you can see 6 numbered spaces. And what's actually really great about this plan is it somewhat synthesizes parking optimization between the two. So again, you saw on the ZLS above, it said there was no existing parking. It's really just, a driveway and a lot of asphalt area and a garage. There's no existing loop drive, I guess is what I'm getting at. The entire area where on 132, parking spaces 1, 2, and 3 are shown, that's all just, unused space. And what we're doing on 132 is creating 6 spaces, one of which is handicap accessible, which is a slam dunk, and then adding 2 spaces to 138. So I believe just by the survey that 0 parking spaces, I believe are shown on this, ZLS. And a big part of that is because there's just nothing compliant and there's no parking spaces. There was a garage. So
No,
we're
I can
actually-
understand, Mr. Moses, I'm doing what you're saying, but currently it's 1.3 spaces per dwelling. You're looking to do 5 units. That goes into 7+ spaces. Am I correct to assume that?
Yes, sir. That math is correct. It's actually 6.5, but zoning rounds up to 7. But notwithstanding, there's no parking spaces on 132. And I just want to make this point crystal clear that between the 2 properties today, there's 6 spaces. And as proposed, there would be 14. So a net gain of 8 parking spaces between the 2 properties, which I feel like would help alleviate many of the parking issues within that vicinity of Flax Hill.
Now, how are you gonna get the 14? Are you joining the parking or
No,
you
it's
got
just,
6?
there's 6 on 132. There will be proposed 8 spaces on 138. So there's a net gain of 6 to 132 and a net gain of 2 to 138, meaning in totality, a net gain of 8 between the 2 sites.
So Mr. Moses and Madam Chair, back to my vote, I would go forward with the clarification on the parking.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, so Steve Kleppen, if this gets approved this evening, it opens the door to smaller properties coming in with a special permit application for historic renovation, or tell me in summary, tell me what this does.
That's it in a nutshell. So you're not taking any action on any specific elements of the development on any property. You're only taking action on the text amendment that would allow the historic preservation by historic preservation special permit process to be permitted on smaller properties, not just on the larger ones. That's it.
So there is no carte blanche. It's just everything has to come through a special permit process.
Correct.
Yeah, we've been told enough time tonight what our purview is, but we're just prepping for the merger of planning and zoning and for those that will be on both commissions, okay? So anyway, I still have some reservations, but I'm going to support it. I'm going to put forth the resolution to approve. Do I have a second?
I second. Mike,
Mike seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you guys for your time.
Mr.
Thank
Blank,
you.
Mr. Moses, thank you.
Yes,
It was-
to the whole commission, thank you so much for your ear and your guidance, your insight, your comments. It's always appreciated.
Thank
We'll
you.
be
was a good-
watching.
It was a good conversation, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the zoning commission referral moratorium on self-storage and wholesale distribution in the industrial number 1 zone and restricted industrial zone. So a couple of things. One is Brian Baxendale. Brian, you sent me, I don't remember now if you sent it to the whole commission or just to me of items that you wanted to talk about.
I sent it to the whole commission to make sure they're all up to speed with
Okay.
the question.
And then the other thing is, we also received this afternoon, there was some letters and one lengthy one from the East Norwalk, ENNA. So, I don't know what the answer is, in the sense of, we can't receive things at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I understand, I looked at the time for when it was submitted, I think it was 8 o'clock last night. So staff can't react to that, and we can't react to, making a determination, reading the material. We just can't, right? We all work or whatever we're doing. It's just not feasible to be in a good position to absorb what's being sent in. So having said that, Steve Kleppen, and the questions that Brian had, and on this moratorium, ENNA from, I skimmed it, I couldn't absorb. They want to exclude, this is not a public hearing, so, but I like all residents, I like to read all things that residents sent in, or organizations. So that request was to exclude the, what do you call it, Steve Kleppen, the facilities, the storage facilities. So, and based on what Brian put forth, and we can have a discussion on that, what exactly are our options here this evening?
So
Steve
what-
Kleppen.
Sure. So what was presented to you was, so if you recall, it probably was about 2 months ago now, the zoning commission, and this got referred to you first, that extended the moratorium on contractor yards in the industrial 1 zone, as well as 1 and 2 family dwellings in the industrial 1 zone, which are allowed by reference in the C residence zone. Probably a little short-sighted on my part, should have done this all at once, but there, you recall the concern with the Norton application with the distribution centers and the concern about truck traffic which is currently in the restricted industrial zone. So we figured, all right, we might as well address that issue as well, since the industrial zone study is going on. And from a department end, we've seen a big interest and influx in self-storage facilities in the city. Not just the industrial 1 zone, but it's more problematic in the industrial 1 zone than in other areas. That's a particular pet peeve of mine, because I just think it's a really bad land use. It does very little to grow jobs. It does very little but take up space. And the only positive thing you can say is it doesn't generate traffic. So outside of that, it's not a great land use. We actually had a really good potential commercial tenant in South Norwalk that we lost because the lease was signed for a self-storage facility, as opposed to something that would have generated significant jobs for the city. It would have been a real good catch for us, but we lost it based on just the landlord took the first offer, and that's where it went. There's not much we could do about that. So the consultant that's looking at the industrial zone study has made recommendations that self-storage not be allowed in the industrial zones, and I agree with that. And so we're thinking that through, and maybe thinking about where it could be located along the Route 1 corridor under certain circumstances, and trying to get it out of the industrial area, so that we think the moratorium on that use to line up with the same time frame as the contractor yards makes sense. It gives us a little time to study a little more and then finalize our recommendations.
Any comments from the commissioners?
Well, I'd like, Mr. Chairman, to have answer to the questions I pose, which is, when are the draft recommendations of the industrial zoning study going to be implemented, whatever they may be? Is it 6 months away or 6 years away?
So that the goal is to have the draft study to the committee that's over, Tammy represents you on that committee, to get that to them next week and give them a couple of weeks to digest it. And then, maybe we'll meet and have comments and then put the final draft out to the public a couple of weeks after that. And, we're going to be well into August at that point. So probably sometime in September, maybe early October, we'll have whether it's a joint public meeting with the zoning commission. I haven't quite figured out how we'll proceed with that, but there'll have to be a hearing on that end of it. And then ultimately, we would do a similar path that we followed with East Norwalk, where there would be a formal amendment to the plan of conservation and development, which obviously requires a public hearing. And then, the zoning would probably follow right behind that. So the idea is to have the regulations in place sometime probably early 2022.
So my second question was how many land uses do we already have moratoriums on? And I think you've referred to one, Steve, which was basically the contractor yards, which we know about. We're suggesting storage areas, of course. But again, in the zoning, my third question was, why wouldn't we consider putting assuming the recommendations take place by Jan 1 of next year or thereabouts, there's a list of about 6 types of entities in those industrial zones, which really we need to be concerned about. We've mentioned 2 of them already, transport and bus storage is one, oil and the like. They're mentioned all the way through the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. They've covered all of them except the transport and bus storage area. I'd have thought we'd just put a moratorium on all of those until the industrial zoning regs are put in place.
Yeah, and that was an avenue that, the zoning commission, we talked about that a little bit. There are some uses that are special permit uses in the restricted industrial zone, and that it more so applied to the Norden site than it did some of the other restricted industrial parcels along MLK, just because of the nature of the Norden property. Not all of them are bad, and there was potentially an opportunity with a prior applicant for that property to actually add some good special permit uses into that area that I think would have been a real benefit to the city. So we didn't want to close the door on anything happening on that property if there was a use that was appropriate. I mean, there obviously, you cited a couple of them. We don't want an oil and petroleum storage facility there. So am I being, I don't know, would hindsight be really bad if I look back and somebody comes in next week with an oil and petroleum facility application? Potentially. So that's something else the zoning commission I could bring to their attention. Do I think it's likely that happens? No. Am I 100% certain of that? No. And I would look probably pretty foolish if someone walked in tomorrow with one of those applications.
But they need a special permit for it, at least in Norma's case. Yeah.
Yeah. And anything special permit would have those uses specifically, correct?
So I don't know what the rest of the commissioners think or what your recommendation would be, bearing in mind I and the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association for once are roughly on the same page.
Yeah, so only thing I can respond is that the notice that was sent out was just for those two uses. We didn't include anything additional. We'd probably have to go back and renotice it again because we've already sent it out to Westcog, Swerpa, Connecticut Deep. So that would require further notice, I think.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'll leave it to commissioners to discuss. Fran, sorry.
This is Tamara.
Go ahead, Tamara.
Okay. I just have problems with the concept of a municipality regulating by moratorium a business, an industry. You're not regulating a particular individual company, you're regulating the whole industry. And you're stating in this regulation that you cannot do business in this city until we decide to look at it. My question is, I feel personally it could open up to liability because you're restricting free business enterprise. I'm looking at the regulation that you're proposing and it says consistent concerns from residents. The only concerns I've seen from residents is opposing a moratorium on storage facilities. So I don't know how these two particular moratoriums arose and why you are just targeting storage facilities and warehouse distribution. The Norton Place warehouse distribution was withdrawn. So why does this come up now? Storage facilities, you have apartment buildings with 100 and 200 units. They need storage facilities. What I do see is zoning them to an industrial zone where they will be contained. If you open it up and say you want it on Route 1, I don't see how that answers your concern about aesthetics. But my main concern is, how does a municipality impose upon an industry that you cannot do business in this city until we determine that you can?
Well, zoning does that right now with every business. You dictate where any type of business can go. If
That's where.
right, and then there's many areas where you say they can't go.
Business, but you're saying in this one, you can't open up a business anywhere. It's not
No,
by phone, but anywhere. You cannot open up another storage facility. You cannot open up another warehouse distribution. To me, it's just going towards a restriction of free business enterprise when you open this door. And
So-
where do you stop? What
So just to,
industry stop?
go ahead, I won't, you can
No,
finish.
I'm just asking, where do you stop? If you open up this door, where do you stop?
So the restriction only applies to the, for storage specifically, it's only in the industrial 1 zone. So it's not indicating they can't seek us permission to go and whether it's business 2 or wherever else it's allowed in the city. For the restricted industrial, it's not warehouse and distribution, it's just the distribution end of it. So someone could come in with an application for a warehouse. There's a difference between a warehouse and a distribution facility, and that's defined terms. And what we regulate where businesses can go, and some businesses can't go in the city at all. So you do regulate that in pretty much every zone. Otherwise, you would have zero zoning at that point. So I think we have moratoriums are a legal mechanism that's been in place. You have to do it the way we're doing it, through a regulation amendment. It needs to be for a clearly defined purpose and for a clearly defined length of time, which we've done in both instances. And both of them have been in response to concerns raised. One was the distribution centers has been raised concern by the residents, even though that particular applicant withdrew the Norton application. There's nothing to prevent somebody else from coming in tomorrow with a new application for the same property for the same use. Staff has recognized the self-storage as a concern, and the consultant that's working on the industrial zone studies agrees and says, you know what, it's not a good use for industrial properties, and they see that same type of kind of proliferation in other areas where they've done business.
So if you're looking at your industrial study, I looked at your recommendations, you're looking at it for other areas as well. Why are you raising these two particular targets, these two industries, the storage facilities and the, are you looking at wholesale storage and wholesale distribution facilities? Why those two?
So the distribution is problematic because of the traffic they generate. Self-storage is problematic because it's a land use that doesn't generate any street activity. It does not create jobs because usually there's maybe 1 person, maybe 2 that are working at the facility. So it's taking up space that, could be better utilized for job growth and job creation in the city, and ultimately generate more taxes for the city.
Steve, I do disagree when you say that a storage facility does not generate jobs. If something is open 7/24, you have a number of shifts and a number of jobs, and one job does support a family. So I don't support that particular reason.
But just to clarify, I didn't say it didn't have any jobs. It does, compared to what any kind of manufacturing facility or any kind of tech company or somebody else that would otherwise, you could make the argument that a transfer station has a lot more jobs than a self-storage facility, but that's not a use you would probably want to see proliferate in the industrial zones either.
But there is a need for a self-storage facility with all the apartment buildings being built in this city. So who is the zoning commission? who is the zoning department to determine that this is not needed by the city?
Well,
They're
again,
not, they're not saying, hold on. We're not, this is just it, because I don't want to go on forever on this argument here. This is personally, the Norton facility, I would like to see another company come in and create 1,000 jobs, right? So that would be a good problem to have. Storage facility or these transportation like they were proposing before. And we're not sure as to what's, I mean, the owners there can turn around and sell the property and whatever can happen over there. So with a moratorium, it's just in the industrial zone. It's not in the whole city. So if somebody wants to come in and it fits the application, whatever it is, it can go in another, we're just talking about the industrial zone right now. Correct, Steve?
industrial 1 zone.
Industrial 1, while the study is going, the study is still going on. As you heard, Steve, and nothing has been approved or recommendation, whatever it is, it's still going on. So I'm okay with it right now with the moratorium, with the with the contractor's yard and stuff, and when the study's done, well, and if you have to look at adding to Brian's, why aren't we adding everything else? Because I don't like to restrict a business that might want to come in, right? If we restrict everything until the study's done, there might be missed opportunities of business looking to come in, whatever, in the right place and all that. So I like to leave that open on the storage and transportation thing, as was proposed for the Northern facility. And you saw the swell of the residents and all that. And I've said it on record, I live in East Norwalk as well. And Brian lives in East Norwalk as well. So anyway, so I'm okay with it. I don't know how the rest of the commissioners are, and not cutting you off, Tamara, you can chime in.
I'd like to hear the opinion of the other commissioners. I do feel uncomfortable with targeting 2 business industries.
Can I pull up the, can I just share a screen quick and I'll show you the, just the other uses by special permit, just so we all know what we're talking about. Is that, can you read that, or you need me to blow it up?
A little more.
Blow it up.
How's that?
One more.
One more?
There
Can
you
you
go.
just tell us what page you're on, Steve? Because I have that printed out. Or where that, is that in the 6-page thing that you sent to us?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that, Tammy.
What page is that? The one that starts with industrial zone 118-700B at the top?
Oh,
Is that where you are?
No, I'm on the restricted industrial right now. You want, I can go up though.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I found it. Okay.
You got it? Okay.
Yep.
That
Thank
should be
you.
right here. Yeah, it's in this section. Yeah, you questions on that, or? Just give me a second while I navigate back down. Okay, so here's the restricted industrial. There are, and there's no proposed changes to anything in the site plan uses, and you can see there's really not that many site plan uses. Here's the special permit uses. We proposed a moratorium only on the wholesale distribution facility portion of it, not necessarily the warehouse. As I mentioned, there's a difference between what activities those generate and types of traffic. I would say, just my own 2 cents, the other 2 items that somebody would potentially find objectionable would be B and C. Do I think it's likely you're going to get helicopter landing site or an oil or petroleum storage facility on the property before the moratorium's expired? No. I would look, like, as I said, I'd look really foolish if someone comes in with one of those applications. Other than that, commercial recreation, I don't know if that's the best use of the property, but I don't know if that would necessarily be as objectionable. The next one is a really kind of quirky regulation that looks like it was put in as part of the Avalon approval. And then I think there's maybe a couple more. And the other one again is, I don't know if that would be a bad thing. That's a, processing auto parts. It looks like that's something that was custom tailored for a particular applicant. And then the other one's an existing package distribution facility that, since there isn't one, particularly for Norden, it wouldn't be applicable at that location.
Could I
Any
ask,
oth-
could I
Go
just
ahead,
ask a
Mary.
favor? I'm getting a little bit lost in the weeds. So would you mind, and I apologize that you have to repeat yourself, but could you just explain once again the logic of why you're looking for the moratorium? I'm getting lost a bit. I apologize.
Sure. So there's two parts to it. In the restricted industrial zone, we were proposing the moratorium on distribution facilities. As you recall, all the angst and concern with the Norden application, there was a lot of outrage by the residents, how this could happen. How can you let this go through? So obviously that
The outrage was 18-wheeler trucks, 90 trips a day in East Norwalk. Okay, so.
I'm
that's
sorry.
what-
Residential streets.
Could I just ask a favor? I'm partly asking in relation to moratorium because then we're buying time. And so I guess I want to understand the context of, by doing a moratorium, what's going to get resolved at the end of the moratorium. So I understand there's two purposes. And forgive me, you're looking a little puzzled. So I guess I'm not posing my question in a clear way.
No, my dog was freaking out at a deer while you were talking, so I didn't hear anything you said.
So you were saying for two different things. I wasn't looking for the history of why those two things. I'm trying to understand what we're going to accomplish by having a moratorium, what is going to be resolved at the end of the moratorium that would resolve those issues, and then why picking those two.
Sure. That's an easier one to answer. So for the self-storage, I think quite simply, the final plan that's adopted and approved will recommend where they can go and under what circumstances. So I don't know exactly where those are yet. I'm thinking somewhere along like Main Ave and Route 1 corridors would be appropriate. Not saying that they would front on the street, but they could be allowed under certain circumstances. One. For the distribution facilities, I think that's a big concern, is obviously leaving Norden aside, where they can go and they can't go is a big issue. Now, if they were on Martin Luther King Boulevard, that's a little bit easier for trucks and vans to get in and out of there because it's 2 lanes in each direction. It was really designed to move vehicles in and out. Whereas the Norden site is the only other restricted industrial zone. So that's really not the best place for those trucks to go in and out. So we're thinking, one of the initial recommendations is to rezone, basically without getting into the weeds on the recommendations, eliminating the restricted industrial zone altogether, ending up with potentially 2 industrial zones, one with a lighter one and one with a heavier one, and then rezoning some of those other parcels. That's kind of it. in a
So
nutshell.
I want to play a little bit off of where Tamara was going is, if the idea is that the industrial plan is going to give rationale about how to do these things, why would we not have a moratorium on all the activities? And maybe that's a stupid question, but I'm just trying to understand. It sounds like we're looking to buy time to make sure that we're doing rational development with a plan with the industrial zones. So I'm not exactly sure why target 2 specific things if the idea really is to let the industrial plan come into place and make sure that activities fit within this new plan. And I think Brian's question was very good about getting a sense of how much timing, because if it's a relatively short period of time and we think that we want to make sure that we're not allowing people, forgive the language, but to sort of sneak in and get approvals for things they see that might not work under what's coming under the industrial zone, then I can see wanting to do a moratorium because we're looking for rational development. But I also understand we don't want to stop things for long extended times. So I guess my 2 issues I'm grappling with is while those may be two distasteful activities, if all of them are being affected by the plans of the industrial zone, why isn't it broader about what we're trying to have a moratorium fund for, if we're trying to just make sure that the industrial plan is rationalizing what we do? That's what I'm struggling with. And then also the length of time, which was Brian's point. So that's where I'm getting stuck, is on those 2 points.
So there are more than two. So if you recall, there's already a moratorium on the contractor yards, because that was identified as a major
Okay.
concern, particularly in South Norwalk. So there's that. There's also the moratorium on the 1 and 2 family dwellings. So those have been in place for probably a little over a year now on those 2 items.
Okay.
In hindsight, I wish we would have added the distribution facilities and the self-storage when both came back for renewal. Those 2 uses were identified as problematic post start of the study. So that when we first looked at the study, we weren't as, I didn't, whatever, you want to blame me for whatever, but I didn't have foresight that somebody could put a distribution facility up at Norden and occupy the whole site and create a big mess up there. So that came up during the process. Self-storage as a use has started popping up more and more. We're getting a lot of inquiries by it. My opinion, as I stated, is not a good use of land, particularly industrial land. So I think there's better uses for the city in the long term. So I would.
So Steve, I'm not objecting to the reasons of those particular ones. I'm just asking, since before you said you didn't have the foresight to think about it, I'm just wondering why there isn't a broader list of what's already in the regulations that we're putting a moratorium on. And maybe it's a silly question, but I'm just thinking, if we're not talking about a long period of a moratorium and we think the plan is coming out soon, why aren't we putting a broader moratorium on things that are getting, a list of things that are getting regulated? Or am I being too dramatic? I'm just trying to understand, how do we, you're saying we didn't have the foresight in the past, so I'm wondering how we necessarily have the foresight now for other things.
So as I just had up on the screen before, this goes back to the ENNA letter. They had asked that you consider the moratorium on all the special permit uses in the RI zone. So as I put up on the screen, if someone had come in with some kind of manufacturing business there, or something that was a special permit use that we weren't objectionable to, then I wouldn't want to have a moratorium on that. The 2 uses I think that obviously would raise big eyebrows would be the helicopter landing pad or the oil and petroleum storage facility. Now, as I said, could we have done those? Certainly, yeah, we definitely could have. Those would, other than that, I don't know what else would be, how I would see it as objectionable.
I'm with Mary very much about foresight, and also if I remember correctly, and you'll know this better than I do, Mary and Steve, there are 9 industrial zones at the moment. They're going to be revised down to 3 and have different locations in some cases. So, I mean, I would advocate that we put a moratorium on all these major items, simply to make sure nobody sneaks in before we come down with hopefully a decision the regulations being brought into formal law by presumably the first quarter of next year, which could be 6 to 8 months away.
Schedules are always gonna, I don't want to take forever to come with, I'm not in favor of moratorium on everything, because opportunities might be missed. And that's just where I am. I'm okay with the moratorium that as presented here. And so I'm not looking to put a moratorium on everything that exists that could be, even though the short period of time, let's say it's January, you know how these things go, go into June, whatever it is. So I'm okay with it. I don't know how the rest of the commissioners are, as we are right now. All your points are valid, Brian and Mary. I think Steve has answered to the best of the activity. And if if a slightly modified application came in for Norton Place, you know, we would still be in the same place as we were before. So I like to protect those areas, and I agree. Even though Ian and Abe mentioned, you know, how storage facilities create the least amount of traffic and all, which, you know, we think about it and say, okay, that's a good thing, but it precludes, you know, big company coming in, small company, and offering qualified jobs, if you will, that the area needs. So that's where I am. Steve, where are you, or the rest of the commissioners here?
Can
Steve,
I just add something, Chair?
go ahead.
Basically, any property developer who's coming in here will automatically look at, now, once he's aware there's an industrial zoning regulation potential change, we'll look at that and make sure he's thinking of zoning, putting his stuff at the right place. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to look through that type of stuff that's laid out in the industrial zone draft recommendations. As I think Mary will say, they're very clear, they're very well talked through and called out, and they're highly likely to go forward to become the law, I would have thought. But I'll then rest my case.
Steve Kleppen, where are you? You want to, you know, add more?
Can I?
I'm in
No, I'll
between.
let, why don't you let everybody, there's some hands raised, so let, I know Tammy, Mike, and have hands raised as well.
All right, so keep everybody keep in mind, it's 8:34. And I don't want to be here till whatever discussing this thing. So please make your statements succinct, if you will. Thank you.
I defer to Tammy. Did you have your hand raised?
Thank you, Mike. I see both sides of this, but I think we've had these conversations before. We're having this study done. It seems to me it's kind of terminal, and quite frankly, I'm very disappointed that it happened during the time of COVID, because it seems like a very distant process and not something that I'm actually overly engaged with the company that's doing it, even though they seem like they have some good ideas. We're trying to get to the next phase of getting more input, but why have a study if we're not going to use it? And it's getting close to being finished. I'm pro bringing good businesses to Norwalk as much as anybody else, and utilizing and maximizing the assets that we have to attract businesses. And honestly, I don't know how many come in on a regular basis to planning and zoning, but it takes time. So if you have an applicant today, you know, just like we've seen people 2 and 3 times, just like this one little house on Flax Hill, we've already seen that application twice. It takes months for things to get approved and go through the process. So somebody, even though there is a moratorium, but they look in the regulations and they see that the date is going to end on August 6th, that's like right around the corner. So they can say, well, hopefully they're going to lift the moratorium on the date that's on the regulation, and they can even just hold their application until the 7th and then submit it. So but I do really want to see what the industrial zone study comes up with, because that's why we're having it, because we think we don't have it quite right, and we're trying to make it better for the residents, better for the city, for, you know, revenue purposes. So it's definitely a double-edged sword that we're kind of using here, but so I think I'm just as confused as Mary on this too, and I wish I weren't. Anyway.
Okay, Fran?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, my sentiment is with Tamara, and the feeling that we're picking and choosing businesses is distasteful, in the lack of a better word. But I agree with Steve Kleppen in that self-storage is not the highest and best use of our land, because it does not generate economic activity or jobs necessarily. A few for sure, like Tamara raised, but not the kind of businesses we talk about or the POCD talks about. We did just finish a large self-storage or they're still building it, but I'm not sure when it's going to be done, but it's almost done, I think. Behind Itoro, that up on Westport Avenue. So I would think the market might be saturated for a while. So I have no problem with putting a halt on self-storage for a bit. And in terms of what Steve Kleppen said, and then certainly protecting East Norwalk from another disastrous application would work with this moratorium that is proposed. Is it perfect? No, but should we throw out the baby with the bathwater, to use a pun? I'm sorry to use that, but I mean, should we not approve this moratorium because we think the moratorium should be expanded? Or should we just go ahead and approve this moratorium, knowing that it would protect East Norwalk for most things? And it's unlikely an oil distribution center, as oil is shrinking in terms of its market demand, and the gas lines going in all over town. I converted from oil to gas and got rid of my oil tank. So I'm sure, and I know lots of people who have, but in any case, I don't think that business is expanding. And helicopter landings, anyway, I wouldn't worry about that too much. And those are special permit. So I think that I support this moratorium. I'm with Fran on this, in that I'm supporting this in terms of it protecting from the most egregious application for that might be for East Norwalk, and until the study is finished, and also protecting our valuable and rare industrial sites for potential manufacturing, which is really the nature of the name industrial site. We would hope that we could maintain that option. So I would support this moratorium, knowing it's not perfect.
Okay, are we ready to put I'm gonna put the resolution.
Fran, Tamara. In my opinion, I don't think we have the authority or the right to target two industries. If there is an oversupply of self-storage, then that's the marketplace that makes that decision, not a planning commission. I think if we want to put a moratorium on industrialization, we do it for all until that study is released, and then we make a decision in terms of zoning. But you don't just subjectively, because you don't like a particular industry, say, well, we're going to put a moratorium on this industry and we're going to put a moratorium on this other industry. That is not the role of the Planning Commission. You put a moratorium on all, or you don't put a moratorium on any.
Well, it's obviously, it's a referral to us from zoning. Zoning, we're gonna vote and see how the referral goes. Zoning is the ultimate, doesn't matter whether we approve or disapprove, whatever. And if we don't have, we are 7 people, we need 5 to send the 4th as approved or not approved. And I can still see your hands up over there. So don't know what, there's a hand up on your screen, but that's okay. I'm going, everything is in the record. I'm putting forth the, and Steve, I want you to do a roll call vote, please. I'm putting forth the resolution to approve as we have it here, and it's as it says right on here, it's a temporary moratorium on self-storage facilities and distribution facilities in the industrial zone 1, as well as distribution facilities in the RI zone to be approved. So do I have a second?
Well, I never got a chance to say anything. You
Oh,
never
I'm
asked
sorry.
for- It's okay.
Steve, no, I don't know if I can't see people, the staff
Okay.
can see it. Go ahead.
All
I
right.
don't have, go ahead.
I just had a
Go ahead.
small question, small question, 60 seconds. All right,
ahead.
restricted industrial, right? So Steve, you mentioned you're looking at the 2 restricted industrials areas, Martin Luther King and in Norton, correct? Are there any restricted industrial zoning in the Norwalk besides those 2 locations?
No, those are the only 2.
Okay, and with that being said, what are your thoughts on the potential use of those RI zones? Not just distribution and warehousing, anything else, any other type of businesses that you think would be in better use in those areas?
Well, yeah, that's part of the study itself, is looking at, as I mentioned, I think the idea, at least what we're looking at, is potentially merging the 3 zones into 2 zones. So there's just
Okay.
2 industrial zones at the end of the day. That doesn't mean that certain industrial uses won't be allowed in other zones, but like what you typically think of industrial will be more more focused and centralized where it can go. But yeah, there's uses that we're recommending probably get discontinued
All
and
right.
uses that get added in.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to take too much time. And how long will this moratorium be for?
It's not that long. It's like I think it's 8 months, right? I think that's what I.
Okay,
I'll have-
that's it. I'm done.
Oh,
Thanks, Fran.
Just to correct, there's one little odd pocket of restricted industrial in, let me blow up a map I'm looking at on my screen.
Glover?
No, it's in South Norwalk, but closer to Wilson Ave area. It's not a big area.
Well, that is Martin Luther King, though. Talking about Trolley,
No, it's further east.
Wilson
Closer-
Avenue.
Yeah, it's closer to,
It's on
closer to
Wilson
the
Avenue.
water.
Wilson Avenue. You're talking about somewhere else.
A
Because
little
Wilson
further
Avenue,
east.
further east, you're referring to Wilson Point?
Yeah, for whatever reason, I can't blow the map up on my screen.
Well, I know Wilson Avenue definitely is restricted industrial, like Martin Luther King, because 136 goes up there. So I think you're referring to the 136 corridor into South Norwalk from Rowayton. I could be wrong, but I just want
There's
to
a
get an
little
idea.
piece there, but it's mostly in that general.
Could I ask one more clarifying question, Fran? I promise it'll be short.
Okay, Mary.
Steve, if one of these projects did come forward, would they have to be approved by a body? One of the projects that we're asking to put a moratorium on, would they still have to be approved by somebody to go forward?
Well, so if the moratorium was passed, they couldn't submit an application in those areas for one of those uses.
But if they were not a moratorium, they would still have to submit an application, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's it. It was quick, Fran.
No problem, Mary.
Mike, Reset, you couldn't find it, buddy?
Oh, it was Woodward Avenue.
Woodward Avenue. Oh, you mean where the
Those
scrap
warehouses.
metal? The
Yeah, those
scrap metal?
warehouses down off Woodward.
Oh, DHL.
Almost, yes, exactly, almost.
That's Wilson Avenue. That's Wilson Avenue, sir.
I guess, yeah, it kind of wraps around though. Some of them have driveways on.
Okay, I just want to get my bearings right. That's Wilson
Yeah,
Avenue going into Woodward
Yeah,
Avenue.
it's sort of almost before Village Creek. Where that park is and the little road.
Oh, that is Woodward Avenue. I see. Okay, I'm done. Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. I'm putting forth the resolution to approve as we have it here. Do I have a second?
Aye.
Second.
Stevie.
Tammy.
or
Okay,
Tammy.
Steve Ferguson, well, you spoke first. Steve Kleppen, take a roll call, please.
Sure. Miss Langallis,
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson,
Aye, only if I see Fran smile. I haven't seen her smile yet in half an hour. Okay, aye for me.
Miss Peniston. Oh,
Can we come back
Mr.
around?
Come back to Mary.
Mr. Baxendale,
I'll take your risk, your gambling sense, Steve.
Miss Shockley,
No.
Mr. Mushak.
Aye.
All right, Miss Demaglio,
Yes,
and then Miss Peniston. Your last vote.
Yeah. And you need my vote or no to make it?
No, you can abstain, yes or no.
I don't like to abstain. I know Fran doesn't like people to abstain, but I'm really not clear on the issue. I'm abstaining.
Okay, so it's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 and 1.
right,
Well,
okay.
well, the good news is that Mr. Baxendale and Ms. Langallis and myself, we were reappointed today. So if we didn't do that today, we had a problem all night long, right?
Well, I was gonna congratulate you guys at the end, so let me congratulate you all on being reappointed.
Thank you, Fran.
It was a last minute
Fran.
thing, and I'm happy that Brian and myself and Tammy was available today after speaking to Steve Kleppen. It was a rush to the town hall, so.
So
Steve,
you guys can vote. Yeah,
No,
good
Steve
thing.
Kleppen, you owe us Uber Eats next meeting. I want you to send us some stuff
At the
in the
last
mail.
minute that we to be reappointed. Who remembered that?
I did.
That was kind of
Yeah,
a
he
funny
did.
thing.
I
I
don't know
called
why you
Steve.
couldn't, I thought you could have done it virtually. I'm not sure why you
No.
had to.
No,
actually
she
do it.
doesn't, she hasn't done anything of that virtually.
No, you
Okay,
gotta
so,
go in, yeah.
all right, I didn't get
Thank
any
you,
minutes,
Steve.
Steve Kleppen. I don't know if the rest
Oh.
of you got them. I didn't have any.
I
Okay,
didn't
no,
vote.
that's my fault.
Okay.
I don't think I sent them out.
No, so we're passing on the minutes. Okay, comments of director.
Nothing further.
Okay, commissioners, I want to congratulate the 3 reappointees. You know, it was a rush with Donna King to get you guys sworn in so you can vote tonight. So congratulations. News on the merger of the two. There were some legal glitches, but they've been cleared up. And I believe that the public hearing is on July 20th. And that's all I know on that. Any other comments from commissioners?
Fran, I have a comment. This is on the May 26, 2021 memo from Steve Kleppen on condominiums. My concern was that this particular memo was presented to the commission as to why Norwalk does not have condominiums. My problem was it was one-sided. It only presented the views of the developers. It did not present any evidence of the entrance of tenants and why they may want condominiums. It was merely a one-sided view that developers here in Norwalk do not want condominiums. If we are to make objective and impartial decisions, we need to hear both sides. We need to hear the side of the tenants as well as the side of the developer.
May I respond to that? Because it's just an odd statement to begin with.
No, it's not an odd statement. It's something.
Yes, it is a very odd statement. Basically,
Guys, Steve, go ahead.
the tenants don't get to choose what gets built. The individual building, the buildings chooses to make them condominiums or they make them rental apartments. We
Steve,
can't, the city
I
can't
understand.
regulate.
I'm not going to use the word tenant. Tenant may be the wrong word. I'm looking at whether a person is a possible to get into the market of possible home ownership. And that was the question I had asked originally. Why were developers not building condominiums? Because condominiums are a way of entrance into home ownership. That was a question I had asked several months ago. Perhaps the word is not tenant, but possible home owners. And the response that you gave was purely a response of the developers, which is one-sided.
Tamara, hold on. Tamara, I don't know. Your question there is, these are the, and I'll let Steve, you explain whatever it is, but we don't, as what Steve was saying, developers come in and they build, right? Residents don't build, right? If they want to go to a condominium, whatever it is. So we don't have a say over what gets built. Steve Kleppen, go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. We don't, the city can't regulate home condominium versus rental. You have zero ability to do that. Someone could build condominiums if they felt it was worth it to do so. It's not a one-sided, two-sided story. That's who's building, and this is why they're building what they're building versus what you're asking them to do.
I understand what you're saying. My question at that time, when I asked you why they were not building condominiums, and your response was a memo that only gave the perspective of the developers. My question, when I look at this, I also wanted to read both viewpoints of a potential homeowner for home ownership and why that was not being considered by Norwalk, why there was not a support by the city to the developer to build condominiums. Because in other cities, they do not tell a developer what to build, but they do say, you can't build here. New Canaan and the other cities are saying to developers, we do not want these type of apartments here. Why can't Norwalk take that same perspective and say to developers, we want condominiums to encourage home ownership?
Hey,
Yeah,
Tamara,
if I could-
I
if I
don't
could
know,
add-
I
if
don't
I
know
could
what
add
the other
something.
side is.
If I
Okay,
could
don't
add
know.
something, I don't know the numbers behind this, Tamara and Steve Kleppen, and maybe you guys could just take 2 minutes on this. I bought my first condo when I was 19 years old, and it cost $50,000 back in the mid 90s. I was 19 then. If I had to go back in time, if I'm 19 now trying to buy a condo, I wouldn't be able to afford it. So I don't know what it was. Was it inflation, property values increasing in the area? But there's a big gap now than when I was 18, 19 years old. I was able to be a homeowner because on my salary, I made maybe 30,000. I was able to afford a condo then, maybe a little bit less. I'm not sure, around there. But now, if I made 30,000 today or even 40,000, I wouldn't be able to afford 50,000. I wouldn't be able to afford anything in this area. So there has to be some kind of formula that could be put together for home ownership, first-time home ownership, without looking for special help on down payments and so forth. You know, I don't know, Tamara, how to put that formula together, but maybe that could be something on the side that we can formulate together and present, maybe do a little project or something.
Well, listen, guys, there's first home buyers, there's government help, right? There's all kinds of help. I don't understand Tamara's
I'll
thing of
tell you,
saying,
well, Fran, you mentioned government help.
Yeah.
That's not to do with Norwalk, because you still, with the help of the down payment, you still can't afford the mortgage, insurance, and taxes. So you have to move up the line to Ansonia somewhere, Bridgeport or somewhere. I'm talking about locally here. I'm not talking about government help. That's not enough to afford Norwalk.
Can I, Tamara, I want to just interject here. I think
we're gonna wrap it up.
Really
though,
good-
in a few
a
minutes.
really good conversation to have, because
Thank you,
I
Mike.
also bought a condo when I turned 40 in South Norwalk that I sold 2 years later, and I was able to buy my little house down the street. And then I sold that, and then I was able to buy my bigger house. Like, it was a progression of asset building that I was made available to me because I could invest in something that was affordable at the time. Now, there was a crash, of course, in 89, 90, which many of you don't remember, but I do. That's when I lost my job in the city, and I was age 30 and moved out to Pound Ridge. And when I could afford a condo, because the prices had come down in the 90s, in 99, I bought my condo just before I turned 40. So anyway, but that's aside, that's a personal thing. But I mean, the idea of encouraging home ownership is an important point to bring up. And I respect the fact that, you know, we should have this discussion, not right now, but at some point. And with all the, what everybody said and you know, taken into consideration, yes, we can't tell the private sector, but we might be able to help the private sector if necessary to build that. And we have examples in Norwalk of, I look down at Ben Franklin Gardens, which is built next to Ben Franklin School, which is ownership. Those are owned by people. It's affordable housing, and the government helps subsidize that. So, and that was 30 or 40 years ago. Why aren't we doing that anymore? So anyway, that's a good, and I think, isn't Sono Village also that same model?
No, it was 15 Madison Street, 25 Monroe. It was Sono Gardens. It was co-op converted to condominium. It was built on a brownfield. That's why it was dirt cheap property.
So
Okay, I'm gonna give the last word to
good
Steve Kleppen.
conversation though, Tamara. I respect that you brought that up.
Mike, thank you, but we are the planning commission. That is what we do. We need to plan for the future of Norwalk. And in planning for the future, we need to encourage home ownership. These rental apartments are nice for a reason, but in order to have a stable Norwalk community for the next 10 years, we've got to have people start somewhere. And it has to be with condominiums. And that's why I'm saying we need to look at it. That's why I was very disappointed looking at Steve Kleppen's memo, because it only supported developers and their support for rental apartments. We as a planning commission, we have to look at other options to build a stabilized housing community in Norwalk.
Steve Kleppen, you got anything to add, Steve Kleppen?
Yes, and that memo was generated for other reasons. I've asked that question and I read the comments in the paper all the time, too much apartments, why not condos? So that's the question that was being answered. All the people that are building the units, that's why I asked them, why are you building apartments and not condos? And that's what answer they provided. The city's not going to be able to tell someone they have to build condos. That's never going to happen. You have zero ability to dictate that. I mean, otherwise, I think
Have the
we just
ability
kind
to
of,
tell them you're not going to build apartments here. We do have that.
how do you do that? You cannot legally tell someone. So I could build a 50-unit condominium
How
complex.
does New Canaan?
And
do
then
it?
I could rent out each one of those. I could buy 10 condos and sell them. Every person that owns one of those condos can rent out those condos to
Hey,
whoever
hey,
they want.
Steve, how can New Canaan do it?
How does New Canaan do it? How does Weston
They
do
don't regulate. New Canaan doesn't do that. New Canaan regulates their density. They just don't allow that much density in their downtown.
It's the same
There's
thing.
no, it's not.
it?
There's
Why
an
can't
80.
we do
Can I,
that?
can I just finish a sentence without getting interrupted
Go
once?
right ahead.
It's 3 hours in. I'd like to have dinner tonight too. Ridiculous.
No.
New Canaan built the
Be
last
quiet.
large project that was. I'm about done, Fran. I'm about done for the night. This is just, you wonder why that some things should get merged because we're 3 hours in on a 3-item agenda, which should have been done an hour and a half ago. It's just, what a waste of time.
You have to understand there are different points of views.
Hey, but listen, I'm gonna stop.
I fully
okay?
appreciate different points of view, but you can't, there's certain things that are just not factual or correct. I mean, it's just not the case. There's facts and then there's opinion. There's two different things.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? I'm making a motion to adjourn. I need a second, please.
Second, Tammy.
Okay, thank you all. Be well.